You're right. Meetings. There we go. That doesn't say anybody's right. No, so, I mean, the issue is, I didn't have anyone else. But I don't want more than these things. Irish. Yeah. But it's my well, the next, I know who it is. Can we continue going? Anyways, it's not gonna, but anyways, it's the Wenderly I got it. Yeah. So I'll see if we can wipe it. Yeah. And then I think it's in the exception sections. It's a income the encroachment section. Oh, because we had our own encroachment rules. So that was
Oh, that was real.
might have
Yeah, how's it going?
encroachments are yeah, yeah. Well, they're all the same section. That's my point. Yeah, yeah.
Actually, I'm on first.
Yeah,
You guys busy?
okay.
Later.
Hey, good morning. For the avenue. You know, I think I told you, it's a bad idea. Start to so why would they want to in fact, just give it. And from a state perspective, it is one. You don't work. Why would you want to? Okay, two. Sure, one of those.
You're saying the other one's closer? You're saying the other one's
Well, it's not my fault, but I feel like you said something.
Yes, I am. How are you? How are you?
I don't think so.
Oh, yeah, perfect. Yeah, I'm still new here. Yeah.
Who are you?
Okay. Now she did talk to us about putting some sort of motion. What the actual motion was gonna be. She wasn't quite sure what the issues. And you know, we have numbers to deal with this and identify. Good, yeah.
Bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, as long as it was.
Okay.
But
Yeah. Excellent.
hey, good
Yeah.
morning.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
As long as it goes away.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
It's untitled, it's forever. I don't. First community. Look at this.
Morning, everybody. We have quorum. We can begin. I'd like to welcome members of the committee and, of course, members of the public. We acknowledge the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. Follow the meeting on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at toronto.ca/council. And just a reminder, these sessions are being videotaped. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? There are none. Could I please have a motion to adopt the minutes of the previous meeting? Councillor Carroll, all those in favor? That is carried. So let's run through the items that are not timed. 6.9, Councillor Robinson. We'll hold that item down. Councillor Carroll, item 10, preliminary report zoning bylaw amendment application 20 Godstone Road.
Yes, I'll move the recommendations. We're on to 10.
Right, and before I forget, I'd like to welcome Josephine Arkbold, Manager, Community Council and Registry Services, here today to help us out. Item 10 is before us on the floor, moved by the local councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 11 is Councillor Fillion. We'll hold that item down. Item 12, all-way stop control, Harley Avenue and Joycey Boulevard. This is Councillor Cole.
Yep.
Staff recommendations are being moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 13, Councillor Cole, traffic calming Roselawn Avenue.
Move approval, staff report, staff recommendation. Traffic calming, Roselawn Avenue.
Okay, directing the clerks to poll. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 14, Councillor Minawong, parking amendments, Scarsdale Road.
Yeah, I'll move that.
Moved by the local city councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 15, Deputy Mayor Minawong, term prohibition, Sloan Avenue.
Yeah, I'm going to defer this to the September meeting.
September.
Yes.
Okay. There's a motion to defer to the September meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 16, Councillor Carroll, parking and stopping amendments, Fresh Meadow Drive.
Yes, I'll move the staff recommendations.
Staff recommendations moved by the local councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 17, parking regulation amendments and left turn prohibition, Snowcrest Avenue. Councillor Carroll.
I don't think there is a typo. I think my staff already yes, I see a nod from Mr. Clement. I'll move staff recommendations.
Okay, staff recommendations moved by the local councillor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 18, designation of fire routes, amendment chapter 880, fire routes 42 overlay. That is Councillor Robinson. I'll have the vice chair move that. I don't think there's a problem here. Moved by Councillor Carroll. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 19, designation of fire routes, amendment to chapter 880, fire routes, 121 Parkway, Forest Drive. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, please move my fire route. Yes,
Local
thank
councillors moving fire route amendment for item 19. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 20, appointment of public members to the Larry Grossman Forest Hill Memorial Arena Board.
I'll move approval. Staff recommendation.
Okay, moved staff recommendations by the local counselor. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Item 21, appointments of public members to the Leaside Memorial Community Gardens Arena Board. I don't know what's controversial about this.
Yeah,
Councillor
Mr. Chair.
Robinson's not here, but
I'll be inclined to it. We have central staff up here
We
to
do,
make sure
yes.
these go through, so that we're not holding her up. I'll be happy to move him, and if there is any problem, Councillor Robinson can yell at me.
right, okay. Moved on behalf of Councillor Robinson, Councillor Carroll. Those are the appointments on item 21. Leaside Memorial Community Gardens Arena Board. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Well, we were too efficient on the untimed items, although we can go back to, Councillor Fillion is here. We did hold one of your items down. Item, Councillor Fillion, preliminary report, zoning bylaw amendment 3350. So that's item 11.
Yeah.
Local councillors moving staff recommendations. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Was there a second one for Councillor Fillion? No, that was it. Okay. So we have to wait a few minutes for the 9:45 timed item. That would be 6.1.
Mr. Chair, did we move item number 9?
Number 9 is being held.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's Councillor Robinson. It's just a community consultation. I'd be open to having it moved, and when Councillor Robinson gets here, if she has a problem, she can reopen.
Yeah, since there's no motion required for the notice area, I think she wouldn't mind if we moved it.
Yeah, we can move it on her behalf.
Yeah.
I think that's fine. It's a community consultation.
Oh.
Item 9, moved by Councillor Carroll. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Is Sunny Iglesias, sorry for the pronunciation, in the building? So you can depute in 5 minutes, just so that you're ready. Sign. Oh, oh, you know what? I wasn't here that day. So she signed on my behalf. Right. Okay, thank you for your patience. We can now move to our 9:45 timed item. Item 6.1, final report zoning amendment application 1202, 1204 Avenue Road. It is Councilor Cole, as mentioned earlier, Sunny Iglesias is scheduled to depute. Mr. Iglesias? No? Lindsay Dale Harris? Great. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
I have 5 minutes. Mr. Chairman, members of Community Council, my name is Lindsay Dale Harris, and I'm a partner with Bosefields. And Bosefields are the planning consultants for 3 ARC developments with respect to this property, 1202, 1204 Avenue Road. And it's at the northwest corner of Avenue Road and Hillhurst Boulevard. And it's about 800 meters north of Eglinton. And members of the consulting team, it includes the architect, the engineer, the landscape architect, and the traffic engineer, so we're all here. And on April 24th, Community Council had a report recommending approval of a zoning bylaw amendment to permit the development of 7 3-bedroom townhouses at this location. And the application was deferred, pending, giving us an opportunity to discuss matters with residents. And you also have before you today Second report from the planning staff, which addresses the new growth plan policies and makes some minor changes to the bylaw, which was presented to you in April. With respect to the deferral to work with the residents, we've worked very closely with staff and the residents, and we hope to resolve all issues. First, and importantly, the owner of 1206 Avenue Road, you can see there's a yellow highlight. 1206 is the property to the north, and the proposed development of the 7 units is to the south, and it fronts on the north side of Hillhurst. The owner to the north has for years borrowed a portion of the subject property in order that his car, which is now built to 2019 standards, not 2020, 1920 standards, can access. There's been an agreement reached between the owner of 1206 and the applicant to provide an agreement, an easement, which will provide for the long-term security of his access on that existing driveway to the rear of his house, so that he doesn't have any problem getting in and out of the driveway. And that will be secured through the site plan program, through the site plan process. Secondly, there was a meeting which my client did not attend, but was held with planning staff and the councillor's office on May the 6th to address other issues raised by the residents. And I think most of these have all been resolved. I believe the majority of the residents on Hillhurst are happy with the design. They like the way the access works with one driveway, no garages fronting on Hillhurst. And we will continue to work with the residents through the site plan approval process and work closely with planning staff. That's a rendering of the proposed development, which is really very typical to a lot of other developments which have occurred as you head north on Avenue Road towards Lawrence at the intersections of local residential streets. There have been some very attractive townhouse infill developments provided at intersections at Lytton in this location and further up. We'd like to thank staff for all their work in trying to resolve all the issues, and to advise Community Council we are in full support of both their original April report and their May report. And if committee has any questions, Community Council has any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputants? Councillor Cole?
Thank you very much. In terms of this driveway and the agreement with the homeowner to the north, who will be responsible for snow clearing of that driveway?
That will be the owner of 1206 will be responsible for looking after his driveway. It's providing his access. But his right to use that space will be provided for in the agreement.
But it's going to be a driveway that is going to be essentially abutting each other, right?
No, there will only be, this driveway will only serve 1206. It will not be used at all by the owners of 1202, 1204.
Okay, so there's no access to the new building that your client is erecting there to the north there?
That's
so
right.
That'll just be access.
It's just to secure the access for 1206. He's happy. He's written a letter in support, so he can drive his car to the back of his house. He was worried that if a fence went up along the property line, he wouldn't be able to get a regular-sized car through. So he's going to have a little bit of access and easement over a portion of this property so he can drive his car to the back, and then fencing will occur to separate the two properties. But
So there'll be no vehicular access?
No. The intent is not to take people out onto Avenue Road past his
Okay.
house. Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much. I'll call for Sunny Iglesias one more time. No? Any other deputants on this item? No? Thank you very much. Questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor Cole.
I have a motion in regards to this item that I hope to move.
Well,
Want me to read it?
Oh, you don't have to read that. Oh, it's good, it's good.
Pardon me? Yeah. That North York Community Council recommend that City Council adopt the staff recommendations in the recommendation section of the report, April 4th, 2019, from the Director of Community Planning, North York District, with the following amendments. One, that the recommendation one in the report, April 4th, 2019, from the Director of Community Planning, North York District, be deleted and replaced with the following. One, City Council amends zoning bylaw 438-86 for the lands at 1202 and 1204 Avenue Road substantially in accordance with the draft zoning bylaw amendment attached as attachment number 6 to the report, April 4th, 2019, from the Director of Community Planning, North York District. 2, request the city planning staff prior to the completion of the site plan approval application at 1202, 1204 Avenue Road, ensure that an agreement between the owners of 1202, 1204 Avenue Road and 1206 Avenue Road is executed and registered on title to ensure that the existing driveway between 1204 Avenue Road and 1206 Avenue Road will remain unobstructed for the purpose of driveway access to the rear of 1206 and 1208 Avenue Road to the satisfaction of the Chief Planner and Executive Director, City Planning Division. I so move.
Okay. Councillor Carroll, you have a question for the mover?
So I'm just not clear. Is this a technical amendment? Because what was just described, I take it that this gives effect to what was just described for the neighboring driveway.
Yes, it gives effect to an agreement between the applicant and the neighbor to the north that they have essentially given them an ongoing access to their existing driveway, which has been enjoyed for years.
Right, so which the applicant described and you've moved. So I guess all we need to know is if that was worked out, is this a technical amendment because it was negotiated at the last minute, or do staff support doing it this way?
Yes, staff recommendation that there be an agreement in writing between the applicant and the neighbor. And we, and the city is not party to it. It's just between the two property owners.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other speakers? All right, we have an amendment on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. The item is amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 6.2, final report, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment applications, 111 Wenderly Drive, 746 and 748 Marlee Avenue. Questions? Oh, sorry, we have deputants on this item. Michael Testaguza. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning, members of council. My name is Michael Testaguza, here from the Bilieri Group, representing the owners of 111 Wenderly as well as 748 Marlee and 746 Marlee. So we'd like to thank staff for bringing this application forward today, and would like to very briefly go over the history and the benefits of the application, and then take any questions that committee may have. So the application was originally submitted in 2015 by a different owner. That application was for 111 Wenderly alone. It was later, and that included only 6 townhomes. That was later revised when the previous owner purchased the 2 properties to the south. It was revised to 29 stacked townhome units. Now, there was community consultation done at that point, and the surrounding residents did indicate that they were not in favor of such a dense proposal on the site. My client purchased the site in 2017 and revised the application to consist of 10 more common townhomes with access from the rear. So again, that's a reduction of 19 units, having heard the residents and their concerns with regard to stacked towns and such a dense proposal. 19 units were removed, and the typology was changed to a more conventional townhouse style of a development. So as you can see, the applicant, or sorry, the applicant and my client has made significant changes to the proposal since its outset, and of course that was by a different applicant. Now, we do believe that this site, which contains 3 single-family detached dwellings at the time, is an appropriate location for modest intensification. It's 450 meters from the closest subway station, so very close to various community schools, being elementary and high school, and very close to community retail, both at Glencairn and at Lawrence. So it's a very walkable location, and it's a place where the city would like to see some type of moderate intensification. Further, it's located on a major street, and that is an important distinction in our official plan, or in the city's official plan. The current official plan does allow for modest intensification on major streets, recognizing that they are different than properties interior to the neighborhood. Now, that was something that was passed through OPA 320. So that OPA in that specific document recognizes that sites on major streets have better access to transit, are adjacent to developments in varying heights rather than interior to a neighborhood, and do experience greater traffic volume. For those reasons, it was understood that different types of development could occur on major streets rather than what would occur interior to the neighborhood. This site is adjacent to a major street, close to transit, and across the street from 3-story walk-up apartments. So it meets all of those criteria, and therefore, from an official plan perspective, it is an appropriate location, and staff have confirmed this through their staff report. It is an appropriate location for this built form. Now, just to speak briefly on how it transitions to the neighborhood, it's important to note that it conforms to the townhouse guidelines the city's implemented, and more than just that, it far exceeds them. The city's townhouse guidelines request 7.5 meter rear yard setback. This application proposes 14 meters, 12 to the rear deck. The city's townhouse guidelines require a 45 angular plane be respected. This application meets that and is at its closest point 2.3 meters from the angular plane. And having dealt with many applications in North York, I'm sure everyone will be aware that that's a significant setback to an angular plane. Further, the rear yard is to be constructed with an access lane. That access lane is to be constructed of permeable pavers to ensure there's no flooding concerns for the area residents. And all major overland flow routes have been directed to Marlee and to Wenderly to ensure that there's no issues there. So as you can see, this application meets the city's guidelines, conforms with the official plan per the staff report, and is an appropriate location for some moderate intensification in proximity to a subway station. Thank you for your time. Feel free to ask any questions you may have. And I also do have copies of the plans if we need to have them on the overhead for any reason.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joe Nobriga? Morning, Mr. Nobriga. Thank you very much. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you. Sure we can see that. I'm with the Wenderly Park Community Association, and we've been looking at applications for this corner. And by the way, we support intensification for this corner. And based on what you just saw previously on Avenue Road, which is a 4-lane road, a development like that is more suitable for Marlee, which is only a 2-lane road. The premise for this whole justification is that Marlee Avenue is a major street. Marlee Avenue is not a major street. Traffic Services has designated it as a minor arterial road. It is not a major street, and I have 2 documents from Traffic Services to support that. The other thing that we had a community consultation meeting on April the 4th. The final report came out on the 15th, And I know how you feel about the province coming out with things on a long weekend and giving you no time to prepare for this. So we've had 3 business days to digest 50 pages of report, and we sat down and gone through it, and it's full of a bunch of holes. First one is that Marlee is not a major street. It's a 2-lane road, and it's got a speed limit of 40 kilometers per hour. It's not Avenue Road, it's not Bathurst, it's not Dufferin. So the same development applications for those roads cannot apply to Marlee. It's that simple. In the report, it says there are other 4-story buildings in the surrounding area. That is not the case. I'll walk through with the planning department. The largest building we have, homes, are 3 stories, not 4, so that's an error. So the prevailing building, they're all 3 stories. So under the official plan, under the neighborhood designation, directs that the physical changes to our established neighborhoods must be sensitive, gradual, generally fit into the physical character. So a more appropriate build would be a 3-story building, not necessarily single-family homes. We're not opposed to the townhomes, but we're opposed to how close these buildings are to the front of Marlee, because all the other buildings are pushed further back. This is being proposed to be built on the property line. And we've had on this block applications for 2 single-family homes on a 50-foot lot, and planning department opposed converting a 50-foot lot into 2 single-family homes because it didn't fit into the character of the neighborhood. So if that doesn't fit into the character of the neighborhood, how can possibly 10 4-story townhomes, 14 meters in height, fit into the character of the neighborhood? And that was just 2 years ago, 720 Marlee. So you can't have it both ways. It either fits into the character or it doesn't fit into the character. So we're prepared to sit down and look at townhome applications that fit more gradually into the development area. And quite frankly, giving us 3 days notice, there's a lot of other people that wanted to be here to talk, to address council. We don't think it's appropriate that 3 days notice is adequate and due process. Just want to share one more thing with you. So this is the traffic report, and it's hard to see, but in this traffic report, it specifically refers to Marlee as a minor road. It is not a major street. There's another document here from Transportation Services, which clearly designates Marlee as a minor street. So the premise for this whole application, I'm repeating myself, is that Marlee is a major street. In fact, it is not, and I've just shown you 2 documents to support that. This is a recent document, and you'll see here that what we're looking at is intensification that would be more in line with what's reasonable and recently adopted, which is something closer to 11 meters in height, not the 14 that's being proposed, and that the building be set back in line with all the other homes on that city block. I think that's all I have.
All right, well, thank you very much. If you want, feel free to give those documents to the clerk, and they will be distributed to community council members. It was a little tough to read them on the screen. Yeah. Any questions for the deputies? Any other speakers on this item? No? Questions for staff? Speakers? Well, I guess we don't exactly see a lynch mob here. So all those in favor of the staff recommendations? Opposed? That is carried. We're adopting, I'm moving the staff recommendations on behalf of the local councillor. And that's just been adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 3, final report, official plan amendment, zoning amendment applications, 110, 112 Sheppard Avenue West. Michael Testaguza. I guess this is a encore presentation.
Yeah. I'm back again. I assume my last presentation wasn't riveting enough, so I'm being called back. Again, Michael Testaguza from the Bilieri Group, this time representing the owners of 110 and 112 Sheppard Avenue West. So we have reviewed the staff report and the bylaws in this case. We appreciate the speed with which the application was reviewed and brought forward, so thank you very much for working with us. And we have had the opportunity to review the staff recommendation that the FSI be dropped from 2.73 to 2.5. Now, the project team hasn't had the opportunity yet to fully redesign the building to understand what the implications of a density drop of that order is. And as such, the building form is not at this point quite as finalized as you would normally have through the site plan process when we're bringing forward a bylaw. And staff recognize that, and as do the council, and we've worked together to craft a bylaw to make sure that we don't all have to be back here at some point in the future or at the Committee of Adjustment, which I think is refreshing and very helpful, so thank you again. Now, we did look through the bylaw, and there's some minor issues with regards to the required amenity space and the height of the mechanical penthouse, which are both a bit over what the bylaw usually requires. And they're that way because that's how they're shown in our current proposal. But again, we don't know how the proposal is going to evolve given the different density. And so we did speak with the local councillor as well as planning staff and have asked them to reconsider those certain items, and I understand that a motion will be coming forward on that front. So with that being said, I do have a list of those revisions, but I don't think it's, or from our end, what we think is required, but don't believe it's required. We can work with staff between now and council through that supplementary report. So we thank you again for working with us, and if you do have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputants? Any questions for staff? Councillor Fillion?
This is, what happened here is interesting and a good illustration of what we're losing with the planning changes. So I'm just going to ask Julio maybe to comment on that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councilor, I think you're referring to under Bill 139. You know, there's been much discussion about how the pendulum swung to the city. But I think what's important to understand in Bill 139 is that it was actually really only empowering the city when the city was making decisions within the statutory timeframes allotted in the Act. So that's under the new regime, 150 to 10 days. 150 for a straight zoning bylaw amendment, 210 for either an OPA or combined ZBA OPA. And it actually was only really empowering the municipality when it was approving development within the statutory timeframes. And the Act provided that when the city approved something, even if it wasn't what the applicant applied for explicitly, it was not considered a refusal. And I believe that was done by design by the drafters of the bill to actually encourage the municipality to improve things much more quickly. We are testing that premise today, maybe the last time we get to test it. And it's perhaps unfortunate that we won't get a chance to see that play out over a longer period of time.
Just to clarify, so under the old OMB system and under the new OMB/LPAT system that is being brought back, we would have been forced to refuse this application. But instead, under Bill 139, we're able to approve it the way to conform to our official plan.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, I don't know that we would have necessarily refused it within the 90 days that the Act is prescribing, but what it allowed us to do is use good judgment of staff and council to approve something that conforms with our plans, which the appeal test would be much more difficult. So I think it was a very good tool for the municipality at the time, as I say, and I think Mr. Lintern, the chief planner, was very clear that the 90-day approval time and their proposed Bill 108 is untenable. So I think it's really back to where we were before in many ways.
So, thank you. So just sort of thank you all around on this one. A really good job by the staff, cooperative applicant. And it's a case where the applicant was asking for more than what our, the secondary plan approved by council was allowing. It was not a large amount, but rather than sort of haggle over that or get into a big dispute about it, we were able to approve it in conformity with the plan and to do it really in record time, which is always what's important to applicants, is that it get done quickly. So this is just an illustration of how the system that we are briefly passing through, and maybe by some miracle we'll go back to, allows us to deal with applications quickly, intelligently, and to approve them in conformity with the official plan. So it really could have worked out really well, and this is a really good illustration of it. So I'm going to move the North York Community Council recommend that City Council adopt the staff recommendations in the recommendations section of the report, blah, 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 and that City Planning staff prepare a supplementary report to City Council if needed to address any technical issues or changes proposed by the applicant. So I think, as the deputant said, the applicant will now be revising their proposal between now and council to conform with the approval we're giving them, and if we need some tweaks to make that all work, we can do that by council. So just another example of under this system, we are able to move applications through quickly, efficiently, and in conformity with the plan.
Thank you, Councillor Fillion. There was a last-minute deputant who did register with the clerk on this item, Asima Mir. So with the will of committee, I'd like to just vary the procedure. I know we're at speakers. If it is okay, we'd like to hear this deputant and then vote.
Hi, I'm the neighbor right behind this, and it's a 7-story building that's going in. It's going to be affecting a lot of the privacy of my house. I've got children. How am I, like, I'm not very comfortable with this. How am I going to use my backyard? It's a huge building going right where my backyard is. That's my basic concern, yeah.
Okay.
The- Thank
All right, well, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. If we could go back to speakers, local councillor has spoken. Is there anyone else to speak?
Well, I'll just add for, to address the speaker's concerns, and I don't know what her specific concerns are because we have not, I don't think we've heard from you before, but the site plan is still, has not been finalized, so to whatever extent we can address your concerns through site plan, if you could please talk to my staff who are here in the room, and we'll arrange to go over the site plan with you to see if there's anything we can do to mitigate the impact on you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fillion. Any other speakers on the matter? No? Councillor Fillion, did you want to move staff recommendations?
No, I think I already moved staff recommendations, and that city planning staff prepare a supplementary report to city council if needed to address any technical issues or changes proposed by the applicant.
Okay, do you want to take it as a package or vote separately?
What is the package?
Why don't you move the staff report plus your amendment?
That's what this does.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Robinson, before you got here, we moved 3 of your items, 6.9, 6.18, and 18 and 21. Yeah, I was just going to say, if you have any problems with that, we can reopen. You're good? You're good to go. Item 6.4, final report, city-initiated official plan amendment to the plan right-of-way width for Gordon Baker Road. Don't have any deputants on this item, item number 4. Any questions for staff? This is in Councillor Carroll's ward. No questions for staff? Speakers? Councillor Carroll?
Yes, I'm just going to move the staff recommendations. I think that this report is fairly self-explanatory. It's a dedication of right-of-way that, it actually alleviates the need for a dedication of right-of-way. It really facilitates item number 5 and creates a consistent use on Gordon Baker Road, which is now one of the many provincially important employment lands. I'll speak at more length in number 5.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carroll, any other speakers on this item? Councillor Carroll, did you want to move the staff recommendations? I'll move the staff recommendations moved on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 6.5, final report zoning amendment application 101 Gordon Baker Road. I do not have any deputants on this item. Any questions for staff? No questions for staff. Any speakers? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, so quickly, this is the item that needed to be facilitated. Just a word, because I know we're not crazy about self-storage, and this is an application that's about self-storage. One thing that it does provide, though, is that it abuts the employment land. It's on the edge of it, but what it does do is provide some additional parking. If there's more parking demand, and that means more jobs in this employment land, and it helps us to facilitate their vehicles, it gave me a reason to look at this. And so I think that's also why you don't see any opposition from the local residential community, because they don't want to see, unaccommodated cars in the employment zone start to move south into neighborhood streets. So I'll adopt the staff recommendations with your help.
Staff recommendations on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 6.6, we have deputants on that one. Elaine Marans.
Tamara's going to go first, someone that has to get to work. Is that okay?
Yep, Tamara Favish.
And I'll go after.
Sure, that's fine.
It's hard to take a day off work.
Understood. Ms. Favish, thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. It shouldn't take that long. I'm a resident of 106 Fairholme, which backs on to the proposal for development. And before I start, I just really want to thank everybody who's been involved in putting together the plan. It's been a really nice involvement of the developers, the city councilors, and a lot of the neighbors as well, who've been working together to ensure that whatever goes on Lawrence Avenue behind the residents of Fairholme on the north is respectful to the way that the neighborhood looks. So in general, the plan that was proposed looks pretty reasonable and pretty respectful of the way that the neighborhood looks. There's just 2 points that I'd be remiss if I didn't share with the council that are as important to me as a neighbor behind. Most of the homes on my section of Fairholme are small. They're 1-story, 2-bedroom homes. Almost all of the families that live in those homes have young children, including myself, and we do utilize our backyards. I do have a picture. I'm not sure if there's a way to show it, but Oh, okay, I'll go over there in a minute. But the development that is just west of us, if I take a picture from Fairholme of what that large development looks like, which is 4 stories high, but it has a basement, you basically don't see the house, you see the development. And while the development guidelines that have been proposed for Lawrence are reasonable with 4 stories and an angular plane, 4 stories without a basement is quite a bit higher than even what was before, that was placed west of us on Lawrence. So it is our request, it says generally 4 stories. It is our request to lower that to 3 stories, if at all possible, because again, without basements, 3 stories really means 3 stories starting from the ground and going up, and considering the different planes and levels of Lawrence Avenue compared to Fairholme, I don't think it would be unreasonable to consider that. And that's really my request. If I could go over there and show a picture, that would be. So it's a little bit difficult to see, but this is the view from Fairholme of the development just west of where I live. My home is about the same size as that home, and that is a 4-story building that has a basement, so it's below street level. So 4 stories above that is quite a bit higher, and that is what my backyard would look like with this development. Or with, again, we don't know what the developments are going to look like, right? Because these are just guidelines, but, sorry. If somebody does choose to do a 4-story, and it is approved, it would be higher than that. So any consideration to that would be much appreciated. And again, thank you for everyone for your consideration.
Do you want to show a picture of what it looks like now, because you have 2 more minutes? If you want.
Well, you have the time to show more
Okay,
pictures.
I'll show another picture. Here we go. These are some of the current views. This is a lovely looking garden. It's not mine. But this is what it does look like now. And that's quite a discrepancy and a difference to what it looked like. You'll notice even right here, these trees are from what is likely going to be torn down. So even if they do put in new trees, which would be lovely, they're not going to be that mature, and it's likely going to look like what the picture that I just showed you. So, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the deputant? No? Elaine Marans,
Thank you very much.
thank you for coming.
Okay. Thank you, counselors, and a special thank you to Al Rozotsky, Kathy, and Shauna and Brandon for helping me with some questions. So following along with Tamara, my name is Elaine Marans. I'm a long-term Fairholme homeowner. And what we're asking for specifically are these 4 items. I represent Fairholme residents as well as the Incorporated Residents Association. So I'm just going to show some slides that back up the reasons for these 4. Everything I'm going to show you is from an OPA or the City of Toronto townhouse guidelines. The first one, same one that you saw earlier, this is from the OPA of Lawrence Heights. I understand the situation isn't identical, but the point being that Lawrence Heights does allow for the Lawrence Heights OPA 162 secondary plan does allow for 4 stories, but they limit to low rise of 11 meters for the reason to have a good transition to the neighborhood adjacent area. We recognize that Lawrence is a major street, but policy 4.15 of OPA 320 also asks to take into consideration the same thing as this one does, which is the adjacent area. Also from the Lawrence Heights secondary plan, our homes are along here. This is area E in the Lawrence Heights secondary plan that actually has the lowest densities of all of the rebuilding of Lawrence Heights. The Lawrence Heights secondary plan is really great. It shows a lot of green space and parkland and takes a lot of consideration for the adjacent neighborhoods. A view of what some of the townhomes are proposed to look like in the Lawrence Heights secondary plan. Again, 3 stories. The next item I wanted to talk about was backyards. In the townhouse guidelines, there's lots of examples of backyards as well as green space. So we're asking that these homes have 9.2 meters of green space in the backyard. And the reason that we're doing that isn't just for us, it's also for the future residents of Lawrence Avenue West. Additionally, we're asking that properties that are more than 400 meters from parks, which is a major part of Lawrence Avenue West, have designated park space. When Al and Kathy had consultations with the neighborhood, they asked us to point out some areas that would be great for park area. So we sat down, looked at the whole strip from Glenmount to Shermount, and we suggested some areas, at least a parkette or somewhere to sit. When I've since talked to planning, it appears that, unless I misunderstand, that they're just going to take funds from the developers. And there's nothing written in the OPA that you're voting on today that includes parkland. The last item that I wanted to point out is where the 45-degree angular plane will be measured, which is item D, and it's in the letter that I had sent to you, all of this. In other neighborhoods, there's issues with property owners building retaining walls and measuring the 45-degree angular plane from the top of the retaining wall. So in other neighborhoods, amendments have been added to official plans that specify what we've asked for here, that the rear 45-degree angular plane be measured from the lowest point on the property line of the adjacent property. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? No?
Nothing?
Okay, thank you very much.
No questions, Mike? Nothing?
No, don't take it personally. It's just,
Okay, thank you.
what can I say? You were very comprehensive. Questions for staff? Councillor Cole.
Just have a question of staff. The previous deputant talked about the 3 or 4 story differential there in terms of looking at this block plan going forward. Trying to explain, maybe clarify her question in terms of the 3 or 4 story sort of guideline here and how it affects this block plan?
Through you, Chair, the budding development that she's referring to is in a different land use designation. It's mixed use, and it's right at the Lawrence Avenue West subway station. It is 4 stories. It has some mitigating factors in terms of a trellis system that was installed to deal with the neighborhood interface. Here we are talking about neighborhood lands that are being proposed for an official plan amendment for a variety of different types of housing, including townhouse development. The official plan amendment that's as proposed actually goes beyond what we would normally have in terms of a rear yard condition, going from 7.5 meters to 9 meters. And also the landscape strip, there was a reference to the existing mature vegetation at the rear of the houses. We are trying to maintain that with a 3-meter wide landscape area, which again goes beyond the townhouse and low-rise guidelines, which would require 1.5 meters.
And what about the angular plane and the point at which you start measuring the angular plane? Do the guidelines here for this block study refer to the detailed angular plane measurement criteria?
Through you, Chair, the angular plane would be measured. There was a reference to a retaining wall. We're trying to minimize the retaining wall along these properties. If there is to be a retaining wall, the 45-degree angular plane is actually measured from the grade of the abutting single detached homes, not the top of the retaining wall that could occur on these properties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other questions for staff? No? Any other speakers? Councillor Cole.
I just move receipt of the staff report on the block study.
He's not adopting the recommendations.
Yeah, so it just calls for the receipt of it, and as part of the staff recommendation, I move staff recommendations for this report.
Okay, staff recommendations being moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 7, request for directions report, official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, 579, 585 Lawrence Avenue West. We have deputants on the matter. Mark Flowers.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Mark Flowers. I'm a lawyer with Davies Howe, and I represent the applicant. The applicant is proposing 12 townhouse units on the south side of Lawrence Avenue West between Bathurst Street and Ellen Road. And our request of you today is that you forward this matter to City Council next month without a recommendation. And our reasons for that request are as follows. We just received the staff report late last week. I can say that we were very pleased to see that the staff report is supportive of our client's townhouse proposal. However, staff did identify some revisions that they are recommending. In fact, you just heard from your planning staff about a few of those in terms of increasing the landscape buffer at the rear of the properties to 3 meters, as well as to increase the rear yard setback from 7.5 to 9 meters, and so forth. And I can advise that although our client remains of the view that its proposal is appropriate in its current form, we are prepared to make revisions to the proposal to address the staff comments. We anticipate that revised plans will be submitted to the city next week, and that would allow then time for the city to consider those revised plans and ultimately then allow City Council to take a position on this matter with the benefit of those revised plans at its meeting next month. So again, rather than asking you, which I would normally do, which would be to reject the staff recommendations, we are instead hopefully trying to be constructive here and therefore ask that you simply forward the matter to council without a recommendation, again, on the understanding that the city will receive revised plans that address the staff comments in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the deputants? No? Okay, thank you very much. Elaine Morans.
I'm sorry, I'm just recovering from an illness, so I'm a little shaky. So I don't know if there's much point me talking, but since I have 5 minutes, so maybe I can take 3 of them. So I was hoping that you would be open to some of the amendments that we asked for, and then 3 of them would apply here. So I'm sorry if I'm, wasting your time, but I'm going to go for it anyway. And thank you for not texting, but you can if you want, obviously. So the problems that we have with this development, we've shared. We love the report that the city wrote. The only issue is we don't think it goes far enough, okay? This is my backyard. This is what we see. This is an urban forest that I know doesn't belong to me, but how are we gonna get to a 30 to 40% tree canopy if we're tearing down all of these urban forests? I thought what I asked for earlier was pretty reasonable, having backyards. In fact, it isn't the developer, and I have it somewhere, but the real estate company that's trying to sell these townhomes that are going to, they actually advertise rear backyards. So what we were asking for is not just the 3 meters of green space that children can't play in, but 9.2 meters for children to play in, for people to take their dogs, some green space that will be good for the people that are moving into these townhomes, as well as the backyards. This is my backyard. It floods all the time. We have a really big flooding issue. 3 meters isn't going to do it. They're going to propose building cisterns underneath these townhouses that aren't going to be maintained or checked. So what we're asking is when the city does go and fight the OMB appeal, that they add and go beyond the OPA you just passed, which I don't even know is possible, and that's to ask for what's reasonable. In this area, despite it being on Lawrence Avenue, the building that Tamara showed you is actually 3.5 stories. There are no 4-story buildings in this whole area. I know you want to build up housing around transit, but the Lawrence Heights Community Plan is adding at least 10,000 people. So it's not like our area isn't undergoing intensification. What we're asking for is just a gradual transition to our homes, and also to build townhomes on Lawrence Avenue West that are going to be livable as what's being built in Lawrence Heights. Okay, so Fairholme isn't a fancy neighborhood. We've had to fight for everything that we had. We had to fight for storm sewers. We even had to fight to get lights on the street. And so I would really appreciate some consideration thinking about adding backyards, which the developer had gotten close to negotiating on, as well as the angular plane measurement. I heard Al's answer, but in the OPA, it doesn't actually mention the adjacent properties, and we still open ourselves up to having that angular plane measured from a higher elevation. Other areas in Toronto have this amendment. I don't think it's fair that we don't get it on Fairholme, but we didn't have street lights until people went door to door and got signatures for street lights. Our last fight, it took 3 years to get a 4-way stop sign that we just got last year. So please, it's not a fancy neighborhood, but give us something so we can protect what you see here, and also try to make homes that are livable on Lawrence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Any questions for staff? Councillor Carroll?
Yeah, I do have a question for staff, because it is, I understand the difficulty for the residents. The one row of townhouses that has just beyond the context plan on the south side of the street is, I remember when it went through, I think it was under Councillor Moscow. I think it goes back that far. Yeah, but I think the application was even before that, and they argued about it for a long time. But the issue is, it's sort of a 3-story, but it has this little extra setback piece at the top. Is that contemplated in the overall context plan? Was it discussed in this distinct application? I wonder if you could speak to that a little, the setting back top stories, that sort of thing?
Yes, so the development at the, through Chair, the development at the southwest corner of Shermount and Lawrence Avenue West, as I indicated, is mixed-use designation, and the 45-degree angular plane was applied on that property, which resulted in the upper floor being stepped back.
And is that considered a 4th floor?
That is considered a 4th floor, yes.
So are we that precise in the plan for the rest of the length of Lawrence Avenue West? Is that what we mean when we say up to 4 stories there?
Yes, that is correct. There's a combination
It would still have to meet angular plane.
in the draft official plan amendment. There is a policy that refers to a 45-degree angular plane, and it refers to a rear yard of 9 meters.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Cole?
Just a question of staff. You heard the applicant say that he basically wants us to proceed with moving this forward to council without any recommendation, and the recommendation is very specific, and that is recommendation number 1, that directs the city solicitor, together with city planning staff and any other city staff as appropriate, to appear before the local planning appeal tribunal to oppose the appeal of the official plan amendment. So the applicant is saying, take that out, that we should just forward this to council without this recommendation to oppose this application. Do you want to comment on that?
The item is before the item is before the LPAT. Therefore, we request direction to continue our opposition to the application based on issues identified in the report. So we do need direction from Community Council and City Council on this item in order to be at the LPAT.
Yeah, so in other words, if we do not proceed with this recommendation to appear there in opposition, basically you have no essentially sort of arguments before the LPAT.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, that's correct. But I would note that even recommendation 2 directs staff to continue discussions with the applicant. So there's nothing wrong with adopting the staff recommendation today and directing staff to consider the revisions that they've just advised us they're going to be submitting, and with a supplementary report to council. But in terms of today, certainly it'd be better, I think, to have standing instructions for the LPAT hearing in November.
Yes, so in other words, it doesn't preclude any continued dialogue with the applicant, but at least you ensure that you've got a placemat at the LPAT.
Yes, that's the point I was trying to make, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other questions for staff? No? Speakers? Councillor Cole?
Yeah, certainly, I'll move the recommendations of staff to essentially proceed on that track of opposing this application, and at the same time continuing to dialogue with the applicant to hopefully come to a resolution. But if don't come to any resolution with the outstanding matters, at least we have the ability to stand before the tribunal later on in November with a substantive position here. So I support and move the staff recommendation.
Okay, staff recommendations on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 6.8, 2901 Bayview Avenue, 630 Sheppard Avenue East, official plan amendment, zoning amendment, request for directions report. Speakers, Zohir Handy. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Yep. I would like to thank the council for this opportunity to speak on this matter, on the proposed development on the site of the Bayview Village Mall and the seeking direction report submitted by the city planning staff. I represent the Bayview Sheppard Neighborhood Alliance, otherwise known as BISNA. BISNA represents a community of 10 condominiums in the immediate area of the mall, consisting of over 3,500 units and a population of about 5,000 to 6,000 people. The boards of these condos, plus the 2 Amica buildings, have all signed a letter of concern regarding this development. The highlights of our major concerns regarding this development are the follows. 1, increased traffic from residential densification occurring in the Sheppard and Bayview area, which is already highly congested. Neither the developer nor the city has proposed any solution to this very serious problem. 2, changes to the character of the neighborhood and the mall due to intense densification. 3, nonconformity with building height and density limits for the site as per the Sheppard Subway Corridor Plan. 4, no provision for bicycle paths, yet over 800 bicycle parking spots. 5, potential negative effects on vital services such as schools, hospitals, emergency medical services, fire, water, sewer, and electricity. And finally, dedicated parkland space not meeting city planning standards and the loss of mature trees. Given the time constraint, I shall only deal with 2 of these issues, which is density and height, and I have other residents from this area who will speak to the other matters. I will not quote regulations and official plan numbers or policy numbers, but all of my comments are in compliance with such regulations and policies and mirror those in the seeking direction report. Height. We would like the build form to conserve the features that help define local character and be massed in a way that provides a transition between areas of different development intensity and scale. Secondly, the surrounding existing buildings near to the site, and including those facing the mall on the south side, range in height from 7 to 19 stories, Currently, the tallest building is 28 stories, but this building is adjacent to the 401, fair distance from the Sheppard Avenue. The maximum approved height on the northwest corner is 25 stories, and that's the one approved by the OMB recently, whereas the proposed towers on the south side are 28 and 33 stories. The existing 19-story building on Sheppard and Hawkesbury has a setback from the sidewalk of about 100 feet. Without a similar setback, the buildings of the 28 and 33 stories would be overpowering for the pedestrians. In our view, the application is not in harmony with the height and architectural treatment of nearby existing towers, low-rise condominiums, sorry. Therefore, we would like the city to restrict the maximum height to no more than 25 stories. As to density, the subject site is located within the Bayview node, and the permitted maximum density is 1.5 FSI. The proposed densities by the developer are 1.9 FSI for the north zone and 3.8 for the south zone, which amounts to an overall density of 1.71 FSI. The area bounded by Steeles to 401 and Young to Leslie is undergoing intense densification, as you well know. About 40 new buildings are expected to be built, resulting in 12,000 new units, which could increase the population by 20,000 people in this area. 20,000 people. We have seen no concrete plans from the city or the province to develop and improve the infrastructure to accommodate this growth. Infrastructure items such as water, sewer, electricity, fire, emergency medical services, hospitals, and schools. In conclusion, the BSNA agrees with the city planners in opposing this application in its current form. Thank you. Any questions, please?
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions to the deputant? Seeing none, thank you very much. So here.
Thank you.
Yes? Oh, okay. Councillor Minnan-Wong, you wanted to address the council?
I have to declare a conflict. I jointly own a home within close proximity to the subject site.
Oh, okay, okay, thank you. You'll recuse yourself then from this decision-making. Thank you. The next applicant, the next deputant is Joan King. Yes, Councillor Robinson, it's the Joan King. Welcome back, Councillor.
Thank you. I sort of recognize some faces around the table. Hi, Mike. It's been a long time. Thank you for your attention. I've been a member of, I've lived in Bayview Village for 46 years, and I do have some concerns about this application. First one is the height of the two buildings right on the corner. I have to tell you, your Sheppard East corridor plan is excellent. And if you look at what's happened between Bayview and Leslie over the years, you'll see sort of a mid-rise 6 to 8 story abutting the sidewalks along Sheppard, and then the density moving further to the south and the north. As was mentioned, some large buildings right up against the 401. This meets your avenues plan for keeping these avenues comfortable, residential look to them. And it meets the provincial statement, which says, you know, that they should be, new developments should encourage conservation of the local features. Also, may I suggest that the official plan, which says new development should relate to its neighbor. Let's talk about the neighbor. The neighbor is that building which we often refer to as the Arc, and it's right on Bayview on the other side of the corner. It's 15 stories high. When it came, and I remember these days, there was a proposal for twinning around the corner, wrapping the corner, 15 stories on each side. I suggest that that's what you should keep You should get staff to go back and negotiate more. Maybe lengthen it out, but keep it at a height that's reasonable. This site is the high point between York Mills, Yonge Street, Finch, and Leslie. There used to be a water tower because it was the high point. It dominates. And to put a 33 and 28-story building on that corner, it just boggles the mind, and I really hope you will keep to your official plan and stay with the 15 stories. You've got a chance to do it right. The other big issue for me is the infrastructure. It's been mentioned, and I agree, over 20,000 new residents. Do you know that's the size of Lindsay, or Brockville, or Coburg, or Owen Sound? That's what we're talking about between Bayview and Leslie, the 401 and up. So we have to be concerned about the infrastructure. The soft infrastructure, the schools, the children now south of Sheppard are all being bused 5 kilometers away to go to school. Will there be buses to take, where will they pick up the kids? At the corner of Bayview and Sheppard. The hospital was opened in 1968. The catchment area is large. Think of the growth here on Yonge Street. Think of the growth on Sheppard, at Parkway Forest, at Peanut, thank you, Don Mills and Finch. It's huge. And yet, the hospital hasn't grown. There is city property where we could have an expansion. But like the schools, the province has to come up with the money. So it's time that the city shows some backbone and says, you can't have this huge amount of growth unless you have the infrastructure, and you have to pay for it, province, for hospitals and schools. The hard infrastructure, that's a different story. It's sort of, the traffic worries us, of course, all of us. I don't know whether you measure the length of time I wait 3 or 4 lights to go through that intersection on a regular basis, but that's the way it is. I'm most concerned about the sewage treatment. We've got 4 plants in this city. They've been there for 40 years. And look at the growth. But where's the money? But surely there has to be thinking about infrastructure. And lastly, I want to talk for a minute about the parkland. Do you know, you have a policy. It says that if any application over 5 hectares, up to 20% of that land should go to park space. Well, this one's 8.69 hectares. 20%, that's over 19,000 square meters. And we're arguing we can't even get them up to 2. The children south of Sheppard are bused to school, and they come home to a condo complex. Where do they play? But more importantly, what are you doing on this site? You're building 3-bedroom suites, 2-bedroom suites. Why? Because you want to have families, you want children. The city report says this area is inadequate in parkland. Well, that's all right in the low-rise place where I live. The kids play on the street. They play hockey, or they play in the backyard. Well, I don't think these kids can go out onto Sheppard and play hockey. There's no backyard. There's no park. This little thing that they're talking about,
John,
I'm almost
going to
finished.
have to ask you to wrap up. I'm
I'm
getting long
almost-
size. I may get fired by the chair.
Okay, I'm almost finished. This little parkland up on the corner where the city says we have to put in a traffic light because it's so busy, it's so small that kids won't be able to play there. You can't swing a baseball. You can't go to your local school because you have to be bused and you're bused home. Where are these kids going to manage? Look at it you can't just look at this application on its own. Look at the park space. They should be helping to provide adequate space for all these children that have come in the condo developments. I don't know, you have a chance. You have a chance, I think, to make it right. Get back, negotiate, and come up with something much better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. 1 second. Ms. King, Councillor Cole has a question for you.
Yes.
Hi, Joan, good to see you.
I'm setting the clock on you, too.
You still have amazing passion for where you live and for North York, and I congratulate you for still keeping the fires burning. Anyway, it's good to see you again on such an important issue in your community here. I was just wondering, have you had a copy of our chief planner's report?
Yep.
Greg Linterns on 108?
Well, I saw the report that was online, if that's the one you're referring to.
On the 108 legislation that was proposed by the province, which brings back the OMB and...
Oh, that, excuse me. No, I haven't seen that, but I've read about it in the newspaper.
Well, you are basically echoing what our chief planner talked about all of council meeting last week, basically saying if you think there's a lack of resources for sewers and parks, well, you haven't seen anything yet, because Bill 108 calls for a dramatic reduction in development charges, Section 37, Section 42 by developers, and then we've got to make a choice between parks and sidewalks or roads. So I just hope that I'll send you a copy of his analysis of that, because it is frightening what is being proposed. So, and I appreciate your vision.
Is there another question coming, Councillor?
Well, I think I do have a response for Mike in that the OMB, which is, I agree, is where you're going to be, they are supposed to be responsible for looking at the provincial interest in the thing. And the province has got to wake up to the fact that if they're going to have this kind of growth, I'm putting Brockville into this little area, you've got to look at the costs for the infrastructure. And so, I think the city has to get out there, make it loud, make it screamed in the media. The province can't just push through OMB all this stuff without coming up with the money to support it. And that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And, I think this is a good one. It's so funny that we came right after the 4-story issue over the subway station. And now we're talking about a 33-story issue over the subway station. There's got to be some sense, and there's got to be the overall look. So I agree. The parkland, for example, you can't put it in the mall. But they should be getting part of a large plan. Anyhow, thank you for paying attention to me.
Yes, good to see you, Joe.
Okay, thank you. No more questions of this deputant. The next deputant, next deputant is also a public office holder, but I'm going to be doing the time. Doug Stevens is next. Welcome back, Trustee Stevens.
I've seen some faces of these before, so anyways, thanks very much for your time this morning, Council. I've got two concerns. Joan Storm kind of stole my thunder on one of them, and I'll touch briefly on the parkland, but my first concern is traffic. And I really take umbrage to the statement that was on the report on page 31, where it says site intersections will continue to operate under acceptable levels in general during the peak hour. Well, acceptable to whom? Certainly not me as a resident. I've been a resident of the Bayview Village for 47 years next month. For the first 15 to 20 years, I would leave for work during quote-unquote rush hour, drive out of my Crescent, make a left turn onto Hawkesbury, and make another right turn onto Sheppard Avenue, get down to Bayview, make a left turn, and 90 seconds later, I'm on the 401. That trip today now takes 10 to 12 minutes to make a similar trip, so I'm giving up about 8 times the time that I used to spend there. So, and you think of pollution and the exhaust and everything else of the cars that are queued up with me to make that kind of turn. Now I'm committed to go along Bayview Mews, and I understand that they're planning to put another stoplight in on Bayview Mews, which will further exacerbate my trip and thousands of other people who come along that way. So I really think that adding another stop line on Bayview Mews and the additional traffic coming out of the mall, which has to go along Bayview Mews to make a left turn to go south on Bayview, is just going to be further, it's just going to be totally unacceptable. And if this is what's called progress, I'm against this. I believe it just to be unacceptable. In terms of other traffic issues around Bayview Village Mall redevelopment, as a former logistics and transportation manager, I have several concerns. Both Hawkesbury and Bayview Mews were designed as residential streets. They were never contemplated to have the additional traffic now going to be required. Large transport trailer trucks cannot make a proper right turn onto Bayview Mews off of Bayview even now. The second left turn lane, the one on the left side, I've been in that lane several times and had to move my car back so the tractor trailer could actually make the turn. So enlarging Bayview Mews is not going to be solving the problem. Additional traffic in the form of larger vehicles such as tractor trailers, stake trucks, and school buses will now be routinely using Hawkesbury, which is not set up to accommodate such volume of traffic. I understand that your proposal to widen Bayview Mews will perhaps help ease the traffic congestion. I'm a little doubtful on that. What is planned for Hawkesbury? It needs to be widened also. Neither one of these streets is going to have any capacity for bike lanes, although there are a substantial number of bike parking places proposed for the redeveloped mall. How will anyone ride their bike to the mall safely? This needs a proper solution. In terms of parkland, I think that even taking aside Joan's comment about the extra thousands of square meters, the existing parkland dedicated is still almost 2,000 meters short of what the redevelopment site calls for. In fact, 1,976 square meters to be precise. The 1,036 residential units will have a number of families who will need nearby places to play. The condo units on the south side of Sheppard know that there is a lack of parkland around their buildings. Let's not make the same mistake again. As a father of 5, I can't begin to tell you the thousands of hours I spent with our family and various parks in our community. I believe we have a one-time opportunity to get it right for the future residents of these condos and residential units and rental units. I sense that these families will not be interested in crossing what will become very main streets, i.e. Bayview Mews and Hawkesbury, to use other facilities in the community, and they'll want to use adjacent park space near their residences. So please do not shortchange the future by allowing less than the required park area. The rest of the site will be a combination of concrete, steel, glass, and asphalt. Not very thrilling from my perspective. With the allotment of parkland, there will also be adequate area to plant the 98 new trees that are expected to happen, which is on page 17. And that only allows, if you max it right out, about 70 square meters per tree, which isn't an awful lot for a decent sized tree. And hopefully that provides a wonderful canopy of shade for future residents to play under and enjoy. So thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Any questions for the deputants?
Thank you. I just have one myself. So Doug, you've just highlighted something that most people, anyone who stops me in the mall or walking around, the issue of large transport and delivery trucks and the turning radius. That's a common experience that people are having, that right now they're having a difficulty turning it. There are proposals to take away medians where they need to be and deal with that intersection, but you won't be satisfied without real physical, real-time measurement with a real large transport.
Well, unless you're going to cut into the park, I don't know how the little parkette that's sitting on the, what I'd call the south east corner of Bayview Mews and Bayview, unless you're going to cut into that, you can't possibly make that truck turn. Because you've got 2 left turns, and then you've got another turn that goes right up to go north on Bayview. So you have got 4 lanes right there. Even taking the medians out will only give you 3 lanes down, further on down, and even taking some of the space on the back, you're only going to get 3 or 4 lanes max. You really need 5 lanes to make that turn adequately at Bayview, coming east on Bayview Mews, if you're going to use like Loblaws when they bring their transfer trucks in, and I assume there's going to be more trucking, significant more trucking coming into this site.
Right, that was going to be my other question. You're experiencing that now with the number of stores that are there, but part of this proposal more than doubles the number of stores.
Absolutely.
So your concern is
Just
not
the-
just the trucks coming there now, but the
bigger
future
problem,
trucks.
the school buses will probably come in off Hawkesbury. They'll have a tight turn to get into the back end to probably pick up the children who are at the rental apartment building. So I just see the streets are really not set up to manage these additional larger vehicles that'll be on the road.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for the deputant? No? Amelia Ng?
Yes, here.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
I just want to see whether you'll be able to see it over here. Good morning, Councillor. My name is Amelia Ng. I have been living in North York more than 22 years. My concern in this project is regarding to, particularly for the pedestrian and the intersection of Bayview and Sheppard. Based on the information that I supply here, it's from the urbantoronto.ca, February the 16th, year 2018. It shows that our development for all the condo between North York Center, Willowdale, Sheppard, and Bayview, Leslie, and Sheppard area, it is, I kind of give a very a chart showing that there's approximately 40 buildings and with a total 12,419 units in this neighborhood. So I'm pretty sure that North York has collected pretty good property tax for that. And why I wanted to bring that up, there's a few reasons, because I find that for the pedestrian crossing, particularly for Sheppard and Bayview, and I find out from the Toronto traffic information, because this is the page that I cannot find it from there. But for the city standard for walk speed for the intersection, let's say Bayview and Sheppard, the city previously standard is 1.2 meter per second. And now it's currently changed to 1 meter per second. So in this sense, if somebody is senior, you really have to walk very quick. And this is my biggest concern. And other than that, I wanted to show, and I'm sure everybody lives in the city of North York in this neighborhood, that we have two senior homes. We have two senior home Amica on number 15 Barberry Place and also number 29 Rim Drive. And also I understand that there is another senior condo on number 19 Rare Drive, which accommodate 112 units there. And having so many senior in our area, that we are the area with a lot of senior people live, including myself. I'm 65 years old also. So, you know, this is really devastating for the senior. And if the developer are not looking into the pedestrian safety, okay. So also, there was a research has been done by a lady called Jermaine Johnson. And the research done and saying that, you know, the title of this is called Walking Wild Agent, Improving Walking Environment for Old Pedestrian in Toronto in Suburban. And there was a particular page, well, altogether she has 36 pages with a lot of reference and supporting document. If whoever wants to look at it, you're welcome to have a look at that. And apart from them, on page 17 of 36, she particularly mentioned about residents live at the Bayview Village across Hawkesbury Drive and Sheppard Avenue. Okay, and she said that it is really, really difficult that sometime for the people to walk around here. And there was an incident in year 2009 that it was a fatal collision. And because of that, okay, I have also done some research seeing that among 1,038 pedestrian vehicle collisions occurred in the intersection between year 2007 to year 2017. The data demonstrate that the left turn vehicle make up to 458 or 44% of the collisions at the intersections. Most of these are not the pedestrian fault. it is 90.2% of the collisions is the vehicle. And that is also the research that Jermaine has done, and this is what I wanted to show. And this is the area of Sheppard and Rim Drive that we can see. Okay? So this is really, really my main concern. And for the south side of the developer, they are building 33 and 28 story on the Sheppard Avenue East with the 8-story podium. I'm wondering, okay.
You
have
could,
they-
if you could wrap up, you're a little over 5 minutes.
Okay. Have they ever really considered all these information? So what I was thinking is, okay, I would just give some pictures and have the developer or the city council to consider. There is a lot of things that we can do for the pedestrian bridge or the skyway, okay? The Four Corners section, this is only an example, okay? And all these are only my example. So I think I finished all my points that I wanted to make. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Harry Brown?
Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. My name is Harry Brown, as you know, and I am president of the TSCC 1496 condominiums, basically called the Chrysler. And we're immediately across from another condominium complex on Reen Drive called the Waldorf. We live almost entirely in that area that is south of the Bayview Village Mall. Our complex includes 672 units and 34 townhomes. Our board is a founding member of the BSNA. My colleagues on the board of directors, and indeed many of the residents, have expressed concerns regarding the proposed development as presented to the community. We share the issues expressed by others. Our board has reviewed the reports regarding the official plan and the zoning amendments and the city response. And for the most part, we support the city response. But I would like to take just whatever time I have, and I know some of my colleagues have referred to these things, but I'd like to take the time to draw your attention to page 37 of the report and the section entitled the Toronto District School Board Response. Personally, my life work was spent serving the children and youth of Scarborough as teacher, principal, and superintendent. And I'm well aware of the jurisdictional issues around school construction and all of that. And I'm not really here to discuss any of that. But I would like to make the following observations. The children who live in our communities are essentially very, very, very important. We need to be investing in our children. The designated schools for the children and youth that would be generated in the development as presented are 4.6, 4.4, and 4.7 kilometers away from where these children will live. All will be transported, many of them by school bus. My understanding from a community meeting last November that the proposed pickup and drop-off designations is along Hawkesbury Avenue. Now, on Marine Drive, we have a similar situation to what I envisage happening for the children who will live in the proposed development. Currently, we have 5 large buses picking up and dropping off students in our particular area. There are several other smaller vehicles also make stops in the area. Our street is an extension of Hawkesbury, so it's the same width, the same construction, the same regulations. It's a community street. School buses by law stop, observe the traffic ways, they stop the traffic both ways. Students wait with their parents or caregivers to board or alternatively disembark. Some caregivers walk to and from the designated spots. Others bring their vehicles, and they park along the road, along the street. So you add a delivery truck or two, maybe a waste management vehicle, and perhaps a cement truck making its way to a construction site, and you have a considerable situation twice a day through 10 months of the year. On Reen, we manage this because we're more isolated and because we work hard at the safety of our children. And that's a cooperation between the bus drivers, the staff of the complexes, the parents, and the children themselves. So picture transferring this to Hawkesbury. And Hawkesbury is on the eastern side of the Plaza complex. It's comprised by one side of a very busy mall. It is vehicles, delivery trucks, semis, and to many of our residents, it seems unsafe and not what we should be forecasting. Our concerns basically for the children who will be generated expand from the busing situation. Others have talked about areas for them to play. Where will they kick a ball? Where will they shoot a hoop? Where will they do any of the things that our children or we experienced as we grew up? Where will they meet their friends? They can't go to their local school because it's way too far away. So I wanted to bring these and other issues before you because it's all part of the livability. I live near the top of one of our condominiums. So I'm not opposed to condominium life. In fact, we work hard at making our condominium a community. What I don't see in this plan is a way to do that. I see only a conglomeration of people in basically a concrete area with a complete retail mall. So respectfully offer those comments for my board, for my residents, and for the BSNA. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, thank you very much. Toby Wu? Thank you much. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, members of Community Council, and thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. My name is Toby Wu. I am a representative of Quadreal, the owners of Bayview Village. So just a quick highlight. Bayview was originally acquired by Quadreal in 2013, and since then we've had the opportunity to engage with a number of key stakeholders within the community, many of which are whom are here today. Really through a number of open houses. I believe we had 4 or 5 of open houses since 2016, 15 and 16, and an additional 5 community workshops, which were organized by members of staff over the course of the spring to summer months of last year. We felt that these smaller community workshops actually worked really well from our perspective, and really had the opportunity to give us a lot of good feedback, suggestions. Those community workshops were made up of a cross-section of members from the community. We had members of Bayview Village Association, Bayview Sheppard Neighborhood Alliance, a number of our immediate neighbors, the Arc Building, Bayview Muse, the Bayview Apartments, and a number of different stakeholders. We've been able to incorporate a lot of those comments into our revised submission, which was submitted back in November 2018. And those are, in many ways, we believe, is a material evolution and improvement over our prior submission. So we do thank the community for all of that feedback. We also appreciate the engagement of Councillor Carroll and her team, who have been able to quickly get up to speed on this file and have continued to provide us with valuable feedback through the process. As we're all aware, the application continues to track through the LPAT process. We have our next LPAT meeting, I believe, on June 26th, and we look forward to continuing to work with the community, staff, the councillor's office to resolve some of the outstanding matters. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? No? Thank you. Yes, Kathleen Bali? Withdraw? Okay, fair enough. Councillors, any questions for staff? Councillor Carroll?
Yes, a couple. Just based on the deputations, you're recommending that we oppose today in directions that you'll take back to the hearing. You want to have direction from council to oppose, but I'm wondering if you wanted to speak to what sort of box we're in now, because as I recall, prior to my starting to represent the area, what the deputy appealed to was the former OMB, and we watched in hearings that sort of turned into, it seemed to have an LPAT dynamic to it. Is this application that was applied for so long ago, is it subject to anything in Bill 108? Because I note that there's a supplementary report that comments on if it were where it's at in the new A Place to Grow plan.
So this appeal is under a legacy appeal with the Ontario Municipal Board. My assumption is that it would continue to be that. Legal can advise otherwise. The supplementary report is, it comments on the new Places to Grow Act.
Right.
Which came into force last week, I believe. So it just, on May 16th.
So while the appeal was OMB passed, the appeal was to that OMB. We've seen a pretty cooperative approach in pre-hearings, but that was partly because they were in the new realm sort of thing. While the OMB still applied to this application, I'm sure other councils have noted the same. The dynamic seemed to recognize that we're moving out of this type of planning, but we're right back there now with any future application. So we do now have to be painfully aware that a de novo hearing is a possibility at some point in time with this. Am I right in thinking that?
Yes, Madam Chair, my understanding is, I mean, the application was made in July of 2017, so it is under the former set of rules. And there's a pre-hearing conference in June to finalize things for a hearing. So yes, it would continue under the former process.
Right. Okay. And hello, Rob, by the way.
Hello.
Not always here, and soon to be very busy. There are two baskets where the concerns are really still alive, and that is in transportation and the inadequate parklands. There are the height and massing issues, but the biggies that I'm understanding from staff are the fact that we're nowhere near in terms of parkland, and traffic is still a work in progress. Do staff feel the need to as we've heard the residents say, to do some physical measuring? Do we have confidence that deliveries can be made to this retail site that will have twice the number of delivery vehicles?
Oh my gosh. It wasn't a rhetorical question.
Do we need to physical measure, or are we confident in the traffic study provided by the applicant?
Our transportation services staff have indicated they accept the measures that were submitted to the city for review. We have requested a phasing plan to identify how traffic will occur. Since this is proposed to be a long-term development that will occur in phases, so additional information would come with every phase and scale
Yes.
changes. And these matters have been accepted by our engineering staff.
So in a phased plan, if that turns out in real time not to be a workable solution, we can require it in a later phase.
Yes, so by undertaking the phased approach to the traffic study and submitting new traffic studies with each phase as it comes online, it does give the city an opportunity to identify things that aren't working and resolve those issues as time progresses.
Okay. And if development goes in, I've had this in the area further east that I've represented, where we prioritize signals, we make pedestrian realm safe for the residents in the area, which generally means timing lights such that they may challenge the movement of cars that are just trying to go straight across Sheppard. If this much density goes in, will those signal timings that we need to make people safe crossing from Reen over to the north intersection of Sheppard and Hawkesbury, will that take precedence, or the next complaint from some car who likes to drive west on Sheppard takes the timing right back again? Can we actually register with this timing before we get to an approval situation here, where in the settlement we're agreeing to prioritize those people who live in the neighborhood being able to walk across Sheppard?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. I mean, we currently provide a certain pedestrian minimum crossing time, but where we have identified vulnerable road users, such as seniors or children, there is obviously the opportunity to provide more crossing time. Yeah. Unfortunately, this time comes at the expense of motorists. By giving time to one particular movement, we generally have to take it from another movement. So
right.
there are downsides.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. I'll go on the speaker's list.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Cole.
Just a question of staff. In terms of the Sheppard East Subway Corridor Secondary Plan has been approved. When was it approved?
It was approved some time back.
A long time ago.
A long time ago, okay.
A long time.
Okay, so the question I have about the secondary plan, in terms of, did the secondary plan identify those two sites where the two mixed-use buildings of 28 and 33 stories are basically being proposed? What was in the secondary plan for that specific area where the two towers will be proposed or are being proposed?
The secondary plan identifies the entire block as having an overall density of 1.5 times. And then there are some built form criteria about how this block is to develop, with the greater heights at Sheppard transitioning down to the north. So there's no specific height per se in the plan.
So the density is 1.5 in the secondary plan?
For the entire site, yes.
And what does the applicant ask for here?
The applicant is asking for 1.71 times.
Okay. The other question is in terms of the a park space. We've heard that there's a, I think it's a park deficient area, right?
Yes, that's correct.
So if you're going to consider this application in light of what exists today, where there's there's a deficiency of parkland, will you take into account as you deal with this application, the fact is that the possibility is that with Bill 108, that there's even going to be less requirement for any park space dedication by developers. So before you deal with the reality of this application with the LPAT or the Legacy OMB board, whatever the heck it is, would you take into account in the future there's a possibility that there could even be less park space available going down the road. So therefore, do you sort of blend the two and say, well, this is something that is going to have an incredibly double negative impact, because in the future there's going to be no parklands requirements from future development given 108?
Working in the context of what is before us and the applicable laws and policies, we're looking at what we have before us now. And Parks and staff have indicated that there's a 20% dedication that's required, and that is what city staff are seeking. Bill 108 is not law yet, so we are working within the present day framework. And so that is the requirement for the 20% dedication, and park staff have indicated that the preference is that the entire 20% be provided on site. They will examine if there are opportunities for the applicant to make an off-site parkland dedication, but right now, the park's preference is that the 7,108 square meters of parkland be provided on this block.
Is there any way we could put forth a case saying that we should be demanding for more parkland dedication, given the fact we're not going to get any access to any parkland going in the future? Potentially, I'm saying, because 108 is not law right now, but they do have a majority government. So can we at least do that? And because this is future planning, you know, we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with the deficiency of parkland, and this is obviously going to have a major impact on you know, as one of the deputants said, is when you build vertical housing, you know, it's not like single-family homes where Joan King lives. You need more parkland because everybody's in boxes in the sky. So should we be doing something in dealing with this application to protect ourselves against the future dearth of parkland going forward, potentially? That's what I'm trying to guess.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I don't think legally, there's no basis for requiring this application to provide more parkland than they're legally required to do. The city can always use its reserve funds for parks that they collect from other sites to buy more parkland, but we wouldn't be, I don't see any legal basis for requiring this applicant to provide more than they legally have to on this application.
Okay,
All
thank
right,
you.
That's, okay, thank you, Councillor Coyle. Any other questions for staff on this item? Any speakers? Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is similar to the application we were looking at before, in that staff are seeking direction to continue to oppose when they go to the next hearing. And I just want to take a minute to thank the community for really doing a great job of outlining for you the issues that are outstanding still. This is an application that we have to be really mindful of as a citywide impact. Malls across the city, we've heard most recently of Yorkdale. There's one floating around, though not formally applied for. It seems to be popping up on websites everywhere for Fairview Mall nearby. And when you look at this application, it's easy to see why. You can put, if they get through, if they're approved, you can put a fair amount of height and condo density onto a shopping mall parcel, and it calculates out to 1.7. They're only a little bit over the 1.5 that's required, because you're basically just filling in all the cement around the mall that is all one times. And so, you know, every effort has been made here to make it so that you could do that on this site and not destroy the mall. The applicant maintains their intent is that the mall continue to be a success, and in fact, the center of the community they're building. But the focus of the community that surrounds the mall is that they really don't see yet that it will feel like a community. Getting to it, walking across the street to it, which, by the way, right now happens constantly. People scurry back and forth across Bayview Views anywhere because they can. The volume of it is really quite manageable right now. They'll have to make a big behavior change if this becomes the major road that the trucks turn into and then go into a delivery. This becomes a whole different neighborhood route. And so all of those things still need to be addressed. Ms. Ng brought up the issues around pedestrian crossing standards. The volumes now, we should at least pat ourselves on the back for one thing. The volumes of pedestrians crossing Sheppard from the south side mean that we have done some good planning in the past. There are a huge number of pedestrians in this neighborhood. And so to demand that we take special measures for those pedestrians any time of the day, because I live east of the mall, I come out on Hawkesbury to get back on Sheppard. I generally park at the back because that's where the Starbucks is. So when I'm coming out that road, I always have to be careful. There are pedestrians there. I never envisioned making that same turn when my kids were babies. And so we may find that this has a big impact on Sheppard, east and west drivers. But at this point, I would say that as long as we are able to take whatever is our new normal after the crosstown and keep the north-south routes all across the North York City, where that's going to be the impact, if we can keep people moving north and south and we can deal with the turns in each application with the help of the development community, then we can absorb some of the density they're asking us for. This application just doesn't happen to be there yet. And so dealing with how school kids are going to get in and out, pedestrians getting to the subway are going to get in and out, and people who choose to drop their family off at the subway are going to get in and out, really have to be addressed before we're ready to have a minutes of settlement to take to a hearing. So I thank you for your patience in listening to the residents, even though I know you're going to agree with them that we should adopt the opposition. But now you know what we're looking to see in a minutes of settlement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other speakers on this item? Councillor Cole?
Yes, I think Councillor Carroll really made an important point. This development really has citywide impact, because there are malls across the city that are undergoing the same type of pressure. And I happened to represent Yorkdale. And if you want to see a mall in transition, and we just approved three, I think, 30-story buildings across the street in the old Holiday Inn site on the east side of Dufferin. So you try crossing, you talked about Bayview and Sheppard, try crossing Dufferin, 401, Wilson any time of day or night. You can't. You cannot cross the street. You have to basically circumvent and go all the way around, or else you risk your life. And meanwhile, Yorkdale is proposing major developments that will include residential towers, more retail. I mean, it's a wonderful mall. It's the most profitable mall in Canada. So what goes on in Yorkdale's future plan is going to have a dramatic impact, never mind pedestrian safety, in terms of impact on services, parkland. And right now, as I said, I dare you to try to get near Yorkdale by car, by bicycle. Well, bicycle, forget it. You can't do it. So I think what happens here at Bayview is very important, because there is a secondary plan in place. And I know a lot of work went into that secondary plan, I'm sure, that gives people guidelines, and now all of a sudden there seems to be a huge variation from that plan that was arrived at through, I'm sure, days and nights of study and public consultation. So I think the constituents, the Residents Association, are very right to be alarmed and raise these concerns about the impact this is going to have on their quality of life, the children, the pedestrian safety issue, the whole dramatic impact it's going to have on a community. And so I just think, wow, imagine what we're going to be in for at Yorkdale and coming down the future. So what happens here, and the decisions are made by the tribunal, whatever it's called these days in the interim, is going to really have an impact on what decisions are made in Yorkdale and other malls going forward. So that's why it's important that city staff take a strong position at trying to defend the secondary plan, and because as Councillor Carroll said, this has significant impact on many other malls and commercial centers right across the city. So it is daunting, but I think it's critical that we try to protect our secondary plans. And that's why we're anxiously awaiting for the Midtown and Focus plan that we spent 8 years on, right, Councillor Robinson? That the province is supposed to sign off on, but we'll hope. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Any other speakers? Councillor Carroll, did you want to move the staff recommendation?
Yeah, I thought I spoke to that when I spoke. Sorry about that.
Okay, great. The recommendations are on the floor and being moved. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 22, request to demolish residential building at 21 Southvale Drive. Brent Butler. If you want to bring my office, I'll second it. Mr. Butler, welcome. You have 5 minutes.
Yes. Good morning. Thank you kindly for having me here today. I'm the homeowner of 19 Southvale Drive, the neighbor located in closest proximity to 21 Southvale, the home noted in the demolition permit. To provide you some context and perspective as I read through this document, my home is approximately 1 foot away from 21 Southvale Drive's property line. I have within 1 feet of this property line a shower window, living room window, basement washroom window, and basement bedroom window, along with many dangerous and pertinent home connections, such as hydrometer, gas, cable connections, pipe exits for furnace, and numerous electrical connections, to name a few. Again, all of this is within 1 feet from 21 Southvale Drive. I'm here today to voice my concerns of this demolition permit, which I believe is very premature, given the many outstanding items still needing to be remedied with myself, Concert, and Parks. I'm requesting that you refuse or defer the application to demolish the home at 21 Southvale Drive until a time that a plan is in place that addresses and ensures my safety, privacy, quality of life, and well-being. I'm also hoping to have better clarity and transparency from Parks with respect to timeline and guidelines for the eventual 21 Southvale Drive project. I was not consulted on this demolition plan or advised of it by the developer, even though they communicated that I would be. The demolition permit and conditions outlined are extremely vague and don't alleviate any of my safety and privacy concerns as the most immediate neighbor to the project. These concerns have been noted numerous times to Concert and Parks over the last several months. With regard to the demolition permit, it outlines only the following conditions must be met for option 3. A construction fence to be erected, debris and rubble to be removed, and then to place down soil and backfill any holes. Even though I met with Parks and Concert March 5th and March 13th to have conversation about this project, nothing came out of it. I still have no line of sight or feedback on how they will alleviate my concerns, even though I asked them both for formal outlines and or proposal of action items pertaining to the property prior to demolition. They have asked for more time to get back to me. In addition, I have no clarity on timelines of next steps. Will I be living next to a vacant piece of land for 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Because I would far rather live next to a vacant home until there is a plan in place. And I don't think anyone would want to live next to a vacant piece of land with no plans in sight. This vacant piece of land has the prospect of becoming a landfill mud park for what could be the long term. So again, another reason why I'm not sure why this is being pushed through, as future planning is lacking right now. I truly feel like the cart is being put in front of the horse, and things are being rushed so that the developer can move on from this. Until further planning has been put into place, there's no rush to have this property torn down, in my opinion. The current building presents no safety concerns and is not housing homeless people. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done to ensure a mutually beneficial project here, and I believe that should you approve this demolition permit, both concert and Parks engagement with myself, the homeowner will be negatively impacted and deteriorate. It's important that we keep these parties engaged and concerned about the impact this property will have to the immediate neighbors. Also, I believe refusing this demolition plan will put a sense of urgency under the developer and Parks to start engaging in more meaningful and well thought out planning conversations. I will finish off with these last thoughts. I know I'm the little guy in this situation, and this has been tough for me so far, to be honest, but it's also important that I stick up for what's right, and I know with your support here, this will be a huge step in ensuring a more solid, detailed, and well thought out demolition and action plan moving forward. I can promise that. Again, I will reiterate that this project should have a positive impact to all stakeholders, including myself as the immediate neighbor living within 1 foot of this property line. I'm really hoping and pleading that you select option 1 or defer, and thus encourage further conversations with myself, Parks and Concert. I'm all for this project, and I think it will be fantastic, but also know there's a lot of planning that still needs to be completed. There's more time, more effort that needs to be allocated from myself, Parks and Concert to ensure, again, a mutually well-planned and enjoyed project for all stakeholders. I just don't want to be left with no voice, and supporting me here today, you will give me that voice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for the deputant?
I don't have any, but I would like to speak on this issue.
Sure, we'll go to questions for staff first. Are there any other deputants on this matter? No? Okay, questions for staff?
Oh, sorry.
We'll get to speakers.
I don't have any questions.
No questions for staff. Speakers? Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What I'm going to recommend to council is that we do defer this to our next NYCC meeting for 2 reasons. You've heard some of the arguments made by the deputant, but also the Leaside Memorial Community Gardens Arena are not fully aware of this proposal, and I'm meeting with them actually tonight, this evening, at 7 p.m. to discuss it. So if you would be open to that, I'd like to defer this item for 1 month.
Okay, any other speakers? There's a motion to defer. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 23. Permanent public highway closures for Lawrence Heights Revitalization Project, Northeast District Stage 3. Councillor Cole, this is actually your item. I've been just alerted by the clerk that staff are requesting that this item be withdrawn. Are you in concurrence? Okay, so a motion to withdraw? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 24, we have a deputant, Albert Albergel. Thank you very much for coming. You have 5 minutes.
I won't need the 5 minutes. I'll be very quick. My name is Albert Abergel. I'm the owner and reside of 207 Armour Boulevard, and I'm here to ask you to grant authority to Transportation Services to enter into an encroachment agreement with me on the hedges that are there, the small fence that's there. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. I just have one question. Any other questions? Are you aware that we're facing a positive staff report who supports the encroachment agreement?
Yeah, I'm just here to, yes, sir.
Yeah, so it's good news.
Okay.
I will move the recommendation, the staff recommendations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions for staff? Speakers, I'll just speak to briefly move the staff recommendations. Any other speakers? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 25, encroachment appeal 33 Laird. I don't have any deputants listed on this item. Anyone here to speak on the item? Questions for staff? Questions for staff?
Yeah.
Okay.
These drawings aren't
Deputy-
very descriptive. Can you give us like a summary of what's going on here? Like, I know what your, it's 20, whatever's, the one of this, how long the sign is and all that sort of thing. Is this a business? Is it a?
So through the chair, yes, I apologize for the quality of the drawings. Essentially, why we are reporting is a 0.5 meter setback from the sidewalk is required. There is no setback in this instance, but it's acceptable to staff.
25 meter setback?
0.5, my apologies.
Sorry, 0.5.
Yes.
There's a 0.5 meter setback.
And it's a canopy. It's over the sidewalk by, I think, 2.6 meters, is it?
And it's a business, is it a business? What is it?
Two-story building with commercial space.
Do you have a picture of it?
No, I'm sorry, through the chair, we don't have a picture at this present time.
So it's an is it an awning? Is that what? I don't want to hold you up, but I've got, this is really hard to visualize.
We're going to put it on the overhead.
Thanks.
Want to defer it?
Well, I don't want to get in the local council's business, but I'm okay
What
with
do you want to do?
deferring it. Well, no, he asked me.
That was a question for me. I don't know what the local.
If they're not, are you ready? Because if you're not ready, we can just defer it to the next meeting. Well, they've missed their chance. What is that? You know what? If Councillor Robinson has no objection, I'd like to see a little bit more, like. So I'm going to move to defer this to the next meeting and ask staff to come back with, some more detail in terms of what it looks like.
A motion for deferral is obviously in order. I realize, I think you're Mr., this is Ashrash? Arash? So there's a motion on the floor to defer this item to the next scheduled meeting. If you depute now, you won't be able to depute at the meeting that we vote on it. So.
I suppose visual. Sorry, if I may, I'm here on behalf of MHBC Planning. We're the land use planning representatives for the applicant here. I originally didn't register to depute because it was, staff had recommended approval of it. We've been working on this.
Are you considering this your deputation? Because you won't be able to depute when the item comes back.
You get one chance.
Okay, so just so I'm clear here, the decision here is final to defer?
No, we're not
it,
making
but-
any decision today. We're deferring the item to the next scheduled North York Community Council
Okay,
meeting.
if I may, the item is minor in nature. It already got moved one.
No. You're talking.
Pardon me, sorry.
So this is going to count, if he decides to continue to speak, then this is going to be his deputation. Oh, he gets to come twice? All right.
Yeah, okay, it's not a statutory item, so technically I stand.
Here.
we're going to deal with the entire item next month. Is it next month is the?
Yep.
Okay. The
Excuse
local
me,
coun-
sorry if I may.
No,
The
no, no,
items-
you may not. You may not, actually. We're going to deal with the whole, if you're too busy to come back, I'm really sorry.
Oh, no, that's not an issue. We can certainly come back. I just wanted some understanding, since it's not a statutory item and the
Yes,
item
no, you
can be
can-
discussed.
Yeah, you don't ask, you can't ask questions. It's, and the item is being deferred. We're not debating it today.
We also called for speakers and we took it into committee.
Yeah, it's into committee. You came in, with all due respect, you came rushing in way too late, past the cutoff. I think we should regroup and deal with it next month.
Sure. May I
think of it
just
this way, you have a
so
month
I
to
may not,
prepare your
I can't
deputation.
ask questions, but if I could just provide a little bit of information.
No, the item, we're not dealing with the item.
I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're in committee.
I understand.
Yeah, I mean, you're free to contact the local counselor and discuss the issue, but right now, there's a motion for deferral to the next.
And the reason being lack of proper photograph?
Well, we don't have to give you those answers. There's a motion to defer. We want to debate it next month. Motions to defer are normal and procedurally in order. That's what we're doing.
Thank you very much.
Great, we'll see you next month.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. 26, I'm actually going to defer this item as well. Is there anyone here to speak on a fence exemption for 28 Bowring Walk? So I'd like to defer this item and visit the site.
Say yes. Say okay.
Yes, that's fine. So we're going to defer it to the next scheduled North York Community Council meeting. I'm going to be, I don't know whether you're the homeowner or an interested party, I'm going to be visiting the site. And I would strongly recommend we do that, or this is going to be declined. All those in favor of deferral? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 27, request for fence exemption, rear yard, 84 Glencairn Avenue, Councillor Cole. I don't have deputants on this item. Questions for staff?
The staff is recommending refuse to grant the application, right?
Both. Both. You get to pick.
No, it's an option. We're
two
looking
options,
for
Councillor.
council's advice whether to approve or to reject.
Pardon me?
We're looking for council's advice whether to approve or reject this application.
And so either or.
Whatever you want. They're chickens.
Correct.
Why, could you explain why you left two options? That was a bit confusing.
That's how all of the fence exemptions, we delegate responsibility to council to make that decision as to whether they approve or deny it. We're saying that there's a contravention of the bylaw, but the applicant has asked for permission to build that fence or to retain it.
Yes, and
This can be your fault.
yeah, again, it is difficult because I guess, generally speaking, staff gives me some kind of direction. But since I would grant the application for the rear height without conditions, given there isn't really serious objection from staff.
It's recommendation one. No,
Two.
Two.
Move recommendation two.
I move recommendation two.
So the objection that we had in this case was the material that it was built from and the manner in which it was constructed as well. So the material's not as specified in the bylaw because it's made of a mesh material. It's not a glass or a wooden or a metal fence. It's
Well,
it's
Councillor
only-
Cole, you should have moved a little quicker. I think Councillor Carroll has some questions for staff, or? We are. I assume you were still on questions, because I hadn't called for.
Yeah, yes, and I was just trying to get clarification. So was there a complaint on the material used to build this fence by the neighbor, or?
No, there wasn't, no.
Okay, anyways, yeah, thank you.
Councillor Carroll.
Yes, so this fence, it's not just the mesh material. Apparently the standards are not structurally sound.
Yeah, that's correct. I'm going to allow my colleague, Supervisor Jean-Paul Nadeau, to speak. He's actually visited the site.
Yes.
Good morning, Council. When I was on site, the actual material and the structural integrity of the actual fence was called into question. At the time of my inspection, the gate that led into the pool enclosure area wasn't structurally sound, and to the point where it wasn't able to close securely and safely.
Oh my God.
At which point in time, the property owners did get it rectified, but in rectifying it, technically locked me into the pool enclosure, at which point in time I was able to actually disassemble the fence by removing one clip, at which point in time the fence had collapsed, and it allowed me back out in order to complete my inspection. So based on my inspection, I would consider that not only is the material not in compliance with the fence enclosure part of the fence bylaw, but the structural integrity of the fence as well as the height doesn't match. So our position would be that based on its current setup, it isn't safe.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to want to speak to this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions for
Yeah,
staff?
yes. So in other words, you're worried about the safety factor, given that it's a pool enclosure, right?
Yes, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Speakers? Here we go. Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Cole is a recent addition to our community council, so he wouldn't understand why you are saying here we go. I'm going to move recommendation number 1. I want it to be voted on by recorded vote. And I'm sorry if the councillor was wanting to move item number 2 unanimously. This is exactly why we have a pool enclosure bylaw. There's really no point in this fence. I don't even understand why they bothered, if it was to appease the inspector dropping by or not, but it is not going to stop any child from drowning. And what stopped me in my tracks, I've told the story of having a relative, a 4-year-old relative who drowned, and this is exactly how Carrie drowned. In the winter, not falling into a deep pool, but being trapped in the puddle of a pool cover in November, in exactly a puddle that looks like that. And this fence makes that possible every winter for the current owner and for whoever else owns it afterwards. And our job in adopting pool enclosures is to adopt pool enclosures who will save any child who lives there now or in future owners. That's our job in creating bylaws and enforcing them. And so I'm going to move recommendation 1, and I ask for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Councillor Cole.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing was that I asked staff about their recommendations. It seems kind of ambiguous to me to say 1 or 2 when there was a safety issue involved, and asking the second member of staff. So it's certainly it's a different issue when the safety
Is that a question of the mover? Because I'd be happy to answer that.
No, I'm asking, I'm speaking, okay? I'm speaking. So therefore, if it's a question of safety, which was made clear by a second staff member, I would certainly support number 1.
Well, I would.
On a point of order, like there is a procedural and policy reason why staff are required to offer an option 2 that would at least be safe and protect their own liability. And this is awkward. I think on a point of order, we have to explain the overall procedure of why they are bound to offer an option 2 in the report, even though they're quite clearly not ambiguous about how they feel about the fence.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak to this, and I've seen so many of these over the years, and I understand.
Sorry, I have a point of order. Are we going to have staff explain why there are two options in the report by policy, why we follow that practice?
Yeah, the clerk makes a good point. It was discussed prior to your re-entry into the room, but however, if you want to go back to questions for staff, I can deviate from procedure, and we can do that. These are always tricky, messy situations, and I don't envy the local counselor. And next community council meeting, I'm going to be facing a fence exemption for a pool as well. So if there's no more questions for staff, Councillor Carroll has spoken. Oh, you're indulging. Okay. So
If
Councillor
you're
Carroll.
indulging, if we could go back to staff. In a report where we're being offered two options, is the first option generally the preference of staff in adherence with policy?
The position of municipal licensing and standards when it's relation to any type of fence exemption is always to take the position that because the requirements of the bylaw indicate the sections of the bylaw, we take the position that it's against the bylaw.
Right.
So at which point in time, our position is always that the applicant is against the bylaw, so therefore that would be our first position. In relation to safety and other matters, typically that's within the report itself in terms of whether or not it's a pool enclosure or a height or a sightline obstruction. And then our position is always to give council the other option to circumvent or make additions to the original suggestions made by our department.
Right. And so when a recommendation 2 is included in the report, is it not the policy that if you have a report on a bylaw that tests the bylaw, in anticipation that council might contradict staff, that you're required to include an option that includes in it an ability to take what staff may make non-compliant but legal and make sure that in the future it could be made compliant and legal by a future owner, and that we will be safe from some sort of liability by adopting that recommendation 2 with extra language, not just a councillor saying, I say yes to the fence, but with that protective language. That's why you have to offer an option 2?
The second option allows for council to make their decision as to whether or not to allow it, at which point in time they can make their own additions to it. The requirements...
Your purpose in providing that additional legal language is to protect city staff?
Yes. Our position at that point in time is that the liability is then on the council in order to provide what they believe they would like to see going forward with this fence exemption, at which point in time it goes against what our department stands by because we are the individuals enforcing the bylaw.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Yes, you're welcome, Councillor Carroll. I have a couple of questions as well. Now, when you were speaking earlier, you focused a lot on the latching system and the gate. Should the request be denied, would the owner be required to redo the gate and the latching system, or the whole thing comes down and has to be rebuilt according to code?
The fence enclosure as a whole, 3 sides of the fence enclosure for the pool are in compliance. The only major question is the 4th fence, which is the enclosure leading towards the dwelling itself, which is where the requirements are in terms of the height, the self-closing, self-latching device, the materials, and the structural integrity.
So through all of that, would they conform if they replaced, I guess I'm looking at page 5 here, this gate and this latch, if they yanked that all out and started from scratch and put in something more secure, would they comply?
Yes, they would actually have to install what was approved in the original drawings, which would have been a 4-foot 1.2 meter, either board-on-board fence or a wrought iron fence or glass, and at which point in time they would meet the material requirements. At that point in time, if they installed those particular materials correctly, the structural integrity should be intact in order for the gate to be self-closing, self-latching, as well as lockable.
So if the local councillor moved a motion to grant the exemption on the condition that the gate and latching system be replaced so that it conforms, would that be satisfactory to staff?
That would basically be our position number one, where what is existing there is not permitted. Therefore, staff would then enforce the pool enclosure part of the fence bylaw as is, requiring them to put a minimum 4-foot fence with a self-closing, self-latching device as well as structural integrity. So that would be where our position would be.
Well, Councillor Cole, do you want to hold the item down? You'll talk with staff. Do you want to develop put a condition on approval that that gate and latching system be replaced and that staff go back and re-inspect, or do you just want to put the item to a vote?
The question I had is just to clarify what staff said. So if we essentially say that if we go with number one, then you would go back to them, and then they would be required to make the adjustments, the safety adjustments to the latching door mechanism, right?
Yes, what they would be told is what you see in the photos would have to be torn out, and they have to put down what is required of the bylaw. So there would be no amendments to the actual section, because in this particular set of circumstances, we're saying what is there is not permitted to be there. So therefore, going forward, they have to remove everything there and put down what is required of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Enough on this item. Are there any other questions for staff? Okay. Councillor Carroll, are you satisfied you've spoken on the issue, or can we?
Yes, in moving recommendation
Yeah, so-
one, I'm done speaking.
So, since there's no approval with conditions, strict conditions regarding latching and gate, then we're going to vote simply on the recommendations before us. Councillor Carroll has moved refusal, and that the owner can work out with staff whatever it takes to comply. And you've asked for a recorded vote.
Yes, please.
Okay. All those in favor of refusal? Councillor Cole, Councillor Pasternak, Councillor Carroll, and Councillor Robinson. It's unanimous. Those opposed? Nobody? There's nobody left. Okay, item 28. Request for fence exemption, rear yard, 344 Lawrence Avenue West. Jacques Perez. Oh, you'd like to defer this item? Mr. Perez? Yes. The local councillor has moved a deferral of this item to the next scheduled North York Community Council meeting.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
you should
Okay. Want to defer
mark it
this?
on your calendar and come back, and we'll deal with it then. All those in favor of deferral? Opposed? That is carried. Item number 29, request for fence exemption, rear 531 Cranbrook Avenue. Councillor Cole, you're a busy person with fences today.
Fences.
Yeah.
Any deputants on this? Yeah.
I don't have,
I'm the homeowner.
Okay.
I don't have you on the list. Did you register with the clerk?
I did not. It's pretty straightforward. It's a safe fence. I'd love to.
Okay. We'll allow it unless there are any objections from councilors, but you're not on the list. So go ahead.
Sorry. We put in a pool last year, visited another pool down the street. They had these fences, they were great. These are 6-foot tall iron fences. Talked to the builder, said, are these good? He said, absolutely. Talked to the iron builder company fence. They said, no problem, they're conforming to by the city. We put them in. These are 6-foot iron, solid, right on the house. They're installed permanently. And then we had the inspection, and we were told, oh, they changed the rules mid-year. These are no longer valid. The inspector was there. He said they're solid, they're safe, and that I needed to come here to get you guys to approve it. Hopefully you do.
Okay. Questions of the deputants?
Would it surprise you to know that we didn't change the bylaw mid-year, that it has always been, since we had a pool fence bylaw, that just putting a gate on a door is not a pool enclosure? That didn't change mid-year. That has always been our policy.
But we visited a pool that was built, yes, last year at the same time, and they had it. They had the inspector say absolutely 100% it's approved, and the pool builder didn't know about this, and he had built many pools before with the same enclosure.
So I'll clarify that with staff for when we go to the staff questioning. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other questions for the deputant?
Yeah, just a question. So now, before you talked to the neighbor, did you talk to any city staff about the fence that you were building?
I did not, no.
No, so it was just in discussions you have with the neighbor that had a similar type fence?
He had exactly the same type of fence, and I couldn't imagine why it would not be approved. And his was, because he was talking to, and his was approved.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the deputants? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Questions for staff? Councillor Carroll.
Yes, just quickly, maybe you could explain this to me. Are we now allowing gates directly on the door instead of a pool enclosure?
No, we're not, in essence. There was an understanding, there was a memo from our director that was actually rescinded last year, and that direction was, for a limited time, was that we were allowing these type of gates. We had a challenge on that from our legal department, who led to that memo being rescinded, and as such now we're insistent on the 4th fence, so the complete separation between the dwelling and the swimming pool itself. So no, those gates on the rear of a house are not permitted by the bylaw, hence the application in this case for the fence exemption to permit this one.
And your reason in the report is that you see the fences, the gate is climbable?
Correct. If you read the bylaw, it states that there can be no climbable elements on the exterior of the enclosure, and in this case, with it being on the exterior of a dwelling, you've got any number of climbable elements on the inside of it.
For instance, you could pull the kitchen chair that we see in the picture over to the fence if you were only 5, and over you go.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Just, Councillor Cole, if you have.
Just a question of staff. So I'm not quite sure about this memo that was in effect or then rescinded. Could you just explain that again, please?
Yeah, certainly. So there was by design, this 4th fence is quite restrictive on swimming pool design. So we were getting a lot of pool companies and homeowners that wished to build this type of gate by putting a metal gate across the exterior of a house. And it was looked on it that we would accept those as long as the gate was built properly, in lieu of having a separate 4th fence. But as I said, there was a challenge to that, and as a result of that, the memo advising that was acceptable has now been rescinded.
So what about all the people that adhered to that memo's intent previous to the rescinding of the memo?
So any enclosures that were built and constructed when that was enforced, that we would permit those, still stand. And if a swimming pool enclosure has been applied for and permitted during that period when we were accepting that, then we'll go ahead and inspect it today and approve it, but anything applied for or built subsequent to that, we won't.
So where does the building of this fence come into this time frame?
It was shortly after that memo was rescinded.
So perhaps that's where the applicant received, you might say, some not up-to-date information.
I think that's exactly what's happened. I think they've taken some advice from, and these pool contractors are building these things all the time. They've taken advice that this is what the city will permit, but unbeknown to them, this has been rescinded, and we're now sticking rigidly to the letter of the bylaw.
Yeah, so therefore, for this homeowner to comply to the existing bylaw, what would he have to do?
So he would need a completely separate fourth fence that has to be see-through in between the swimming pool and the home itself, unless you were using the rear wall of a house that has no openings in it, so no doors, no windows.
So he basically has to erect a new fence.
Yes, he would have to, yeah. There would have to be a separate, completely separate fourth side to that fence, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? No. Speakers? Councillor Cole and then Councillor Carroll.
Well, you know, again, I have sympathy for the homeowner here because he obviously got caught up in this memo. So I just, on the other hand, there is a safety issue about pool and fence requirements. So it is really, you know, understandable why the homeowner is essentially caught in this memo revision here, revoking. So I really find it difficult to decide to have the homeowner having to comply with building a new fence, given that it wasn't really his fault, and he did things in good faith, I think. And on the other hand, I've got the conundrum about the safety issue, as we all do with like the previous item. So I just, I would like to essentially defer this item, and I would like to visit the site and talk to staff, to bylaw enforcement here, property standards, before I make this decision, because it is not an easy decision. Yeah, you can see on both sides here. Thank you.
Well, there's a motion for deferral. Yeah, so Councillor Carroll has spoken in support of deferral. I will support deferral as well.
Any way I can say something else, or?
Well, I think you're done. You can come back. But I think there is sympathy among this council because of some...
6 foot as opposed to currently you're asking for 4-foot fences.
You should work with your local councillor wants to visit the site. That is a good thing. All those in favor of deferral? Opposed? That is carried. Item 30, fence exemption 153 Strathallan Boulevard. Michael Beeler.
I'm also wanting to move deferral on this.
You're going to make it a very busy June.
Oh, I mean, visiting pools. Yes, no.
No,
Anyways,
busy for us.
I'm going to
'cause all this
defer
stuff's gonna
this.
come back.
We need more information, and there's something that's come up. So I'm moving deferral.
All right, so you can come back at the next scheduled meeting in June.
Yes.
Will I be notified of what's come up on the file?
Yes, we can, I'll talk to you about it. Yeah.
Councillor Cole, were you going to visit this site as well and take your
Yes,
trunks?
I will be doing the pool tour.
You're taking your swimming trunks. Okay, good.
I can't swim, so
Don't
I'll
jump
do
that
this.
fence. No. Boop. All right, deferral is on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Item 31, David Brown. Oh my gosh. Sorry, Frank Panis. Do that. Have quorum. Is it the will of a community council to continue to finish? I think it's the last item, isn't it? Yeah, motion to extend, to complete the agenda. Councillor Cole? I just want to make sure we don't run off to lunch while you're speaking.
I appreciate that.
Councillor Cole? We're moving a motion to finish. To complete the agenda? All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Great, thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is David Brown. I'm here on behalf of the owners of the property at 44 Glen Allen. The application before council is to ask for exemption from the the fence bylaw with respect to the height of the fence along what is the rear property line here, and also the height of the fence along the Glen Allen exposure of the property or flankage yard along here, and that's the fence in this area here. We've asked for relief from the bylaw, and in discussions with staff have determined that because of the topography of the property, that the application for relief makes sense. This is looking in the rear yard of the property. The subject property is here. This is the neighboring property at 42, and you can see that there's quite a change in topography between the two yards. We're proposing to install a fence along this property boundary here, and in doing so, we're asking for relief from the height of the fence as it is restricted by the bylaw. The fence will have a height of 1.5 meters from the driveway surface here on the neighbor's property at 42 along that property line. One of the issues that's come to light in discussions with the neighbor is the sight line along Glen Allen as it relates to their driveway and accessing or egress to and from the driveway of 42 Glen Allen. The topography of the property, and I apologize for speaking quickly, but I only have 5 minutes. Topography is that their driveway slopes down to Glen Allen, and it's quite high up where the garage is. So coming down that driveway, the elevated height of the driveway over the fence, and this is approximately the location of the property line. This is City Boulevard. It's just around 20 feet in depth. The sight line down that, and I apologize, but it's got a few obstructions in it today. When these photos were taken, there's the tree hoarding, which obviously wouldn't be there. The Johnny on the spot, the tractor, and the dump truck would not be there in a normal situation. And it's that sight line that's the subject of the conversation that we've been having with the neighbor as it relates to the corner of the property. Specifically, the 2.4 meters along the fence line there and along the property line there to create that 45-degree sight triangle for the visual safety, if you will, of egress in and out of that driveway. We have had conversations with the neighbor about maintaining the 1.5 meter height of the fence through this area, and where beyond that 2.4 meters along the Glen Allen exposure would go back up to the 2 meter relief that's being sought at the corner. We would be proposing a lattice through that area to try and provide a uniformity in the height, but also allow for a sight line to be maintained from the driveway as you're coming off of 42 Glen Allen out to the street. My clients are willing to and amenable to that type of a scenario that would show that lattice for those 2.4 meters along the Glen Allen frontage and 2.4 meters along the property line back up the driveway, just to create that sight line as you're coming down the driveway out towards Glen Allen. The historic nature of the property is such that there has been a history of a large cedar hedge along that mutual boundary that did historically provide effectively a wall, if you will, that obscured any sight lines. It was located right through this area here, obscured any sight lines along the street, and there was always a certain amount of comfort, if you will, in that there was a 20-foot boulevard that when you're coming down that driveway, you had a good clear sight line along Glen Allen. It is just one house up from the corner, so it's not as if there's a considerable amount of through traffic that is moving at a great velocity through that area. It would be people just turning onto the street that would see, you'd be looking for and watching as they come around the corner. So to that end, Mr. Chairman and council members, we feel that the proposed exemption that we're seeking with respect to the height along this property boundary and across the frontage of the property on Glen Allen, subject to that 2.4 meters along the westerly boundary and along the Glen Allen frontage at 1.5 meters, with the balance of the height being a open lattice, would be something that we would be willing to accept, and we would ask for your favorable consideration of the request, and if you have any questions, I'd be pleased to answer them.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, thank you very much. Tracy Panis? I'm sorry? Could you identify yourself?
Yes, I'm Frank Panos, and I'm one of the homeowners that live at 42 Glen Allen Road. And I'm on the list to speak along with Tracy and Terry Mills.
Yes, you are. Okay, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Frank Panos. Good morning or good afternoon. I've lived at this residence for 45 years, since I was 5 years old. And I plan to stay here for the rest of my life. I know the neighborhood inside out. I grew up. I went to school in the neighborhood. I've been here for 45 years. I'm married with 3 children. My children are 14, 13, and 8. We have 1 dog. We're active in the community, and we spend lots of times outdoors. We love the tranquil feel of Lawrence Park, and my 2 older children will be driving probably, well, within the next 2 years. My children play in the street. They bike. They learn to ride a bike, as I did on the street. And they love to walk our dog and spending time outside all year long. Our main concern about this proposed fence is safety. That is not 20 feet. That is inside of 18 feet, that stretch from the proposed last post. The grade of our driveway is quite steep, and it's fairly tricky to navigate, and that's one of the reasons why, for the last many years, we've backed in. So we have great vision and care as per the bylaw. The whole idea being transparency beside a driveway. Anything within the 2.4 meters allowance that's at 2 meters is not transparent, makes people, children, animals vulnerable walking through that area under that city tree. Glen Allen Road is a footway to Blythewood School and Lawrence Park, as it's not a through street like Dawlish. Therefore, a lot of people walk on it. Dogs, nannies with strollers, elderly, you name it, people are on the street from morning to afternoon to night. And dogs do their business under that tree. It's the last city tree on the lot, by the way. The owners have destroyed every single other tree. They've also cut into that tree protection when it clearly states not to. But however, it's city property and people walk there, dogs go there. It's very important to us in order to clear sight lines as per the bylaw in that area. We discussed before the meeting, yes, possibly on the turn, 1.5 meters, which is 5 feet with 18 inches of lattice. Well, if that's the case, we would ask that no shrubbery grow into that 18 inches of lattice. Otherwise, you might as well put a 2.2 meter fence there in closed corner. So anyway, the build next door, it's been cumulative. They continue to put concrete. They continue to build more walls. There's been no communication to what they're building. Maybe it's none of our business. They've dropped the grade in that property. I can't say for sure. I'm not a professional, but it looks like 3 feet. So they talk about privacy. We're saying a 1.5 meter fence is 5 feet, plus you're 3 feet lower. That's more than enough space for privacy. The interesting thing is they call this their side lot on a technicality. Their address and their front doors on Glen Allen, but they're calling this their side lot. Our home, as this gentleman mentioned, is one house in from the corner of Daneswood where there's no stop signs. I've grown up here, cars whip around that corner, especially teenagers driving the car. They whip around that corner, so when my kids are biking down or scootering down the driveway, or a ball rolls down or my dog runs down, you have to be careful. When I back or I drive out, or my kids, when they start driving out, you have to be extra careful as per the bylaw. You need excellent sight lines. We hope the council agrees that this fence should be built as per the city bylaw, and it's crucial to take every precaution to make everybody and everything as safe as possible. My other point is neighborhood character. I know the neighborhood, with all due respect, the neighbors moving in don't. I've been there all my life. Lawrence Park has that country feel. It's full of trees. It's full of natural boundaries. There's some more people walking on the street. It's full of beautiful gardens. You don't see a 2-meter fence beside someone else's driveway that's not their own. It's just not there. My neighbor across the street, adjacent to the new neighbors, wrote a letter that the council has saying he's had 5 new houses built around him. Every one of the new owners have worked with him to make natural boundaries. One of the key objectives a planner can tell you is with development is to respect and reinforce the general physical patterns in a neighborhood. A hard wooden corner, 6'6" fence at the property line doesn't reinforce.
You're over 5 minutes, if you could wrap up.
Okay, just in closing, that fence is probably 98% finished without the exemption. They've boarded it already, except for 2 sections, and it is already over the 1.5 meter they discussed.
Thank you very much. Any questions for the deputant?
I should have maybe asked the previous deputant, but why, I just noticed photograph 3 that staff submitted. Why did they drop the grade so dramatically? Like, because that's exacerbating the problem here. Why was the grade dropped? Like,
well, when they built the house and when they approached me saying, do you have a problem with our build? I said, I have no problem with your build as long as you take into consideration the retaining wall. Because when you drop that grade, the angle of repose, which is another concern of mine, I have measurements of the retaining wall, and that's probably the next item of business, which isn't going to happen here, but our retaining wall is moved. So they not only dug within 4 feet of the retaining wall, but they dug down deep. That entire property has dropped. That city tree is 3 feet higher than the rest of their property. We've dealt with this for 2 years, a porta potty to the left of our driveway, and I don't think the homeowners are very understanding of the fact that my wife and I are covered in dust. Our kids are playing sports or playing on the weekend outside, and strangers are using a porta potty right there, and it's constant noise from 7:01 to 5 p.m. for 2 years.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the deputant? Tracy Panis?
Hi, I'm Tracy Panos, and I am Frank's wife. I just wanted to speak about the adverse impacts to us with this fence. So first, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but my main concern, not my main, but one of my main concerns is safety. So I won't be able to see kids or animals walking through that boulevard, in which they do. Like, I know it's city property, and people say, well, you can back out and you have the room to the road, but I'm parked right there. So someone walks across, I can't see them. I can't see a dog or a child. The other thing about safety, and this is more so affecting our neighborhood because of there were 2 attempted carjackings yesterday on our street, and there was also 2 break-ins. So I belong to the Lawrence Park. They send us all the emails about all these things that are happening. The neighborhood watch. Sorry, I'm a little nervous and emotional. But my first thought with a 6'6" fence beside me, beside my car, is anyone can stand behind it. and get to me. And that's what they sent out in this neighborhood watch. What burglars look for: high fences, overgrown trees. And you know what? I get out at 5:36 in the morning with my daughter to take her to swimming. I don't need that extra stress of wondering if someone's out there. And for the look of what our neighborhood would look like, we love like the look of trees. Now we'll be looking at a board fence, and every single tree has been taken out with the exception of the one tree that's left. I called the city for the tree that was left there because there was a hose wrapped around it with the water draining onto the tree. And my concern was, yes, I did call the city because my concern was that that tree was gonna die as well and possibly fall on our driveway. So that's how it affects us. It's been emotional because we've been dealing with this for quite some time now, and had they come to us at the beginning and tried to work with us, we would have been more than happy to work with them instead of bringing us a drawing of a fence and saying, this is our 15-foot fence that the city wants us to do, but we're not going to do that to you. And then it just kept changing from there. So that's why we're here today, and hoping that you can take into consideration to keep the bylaws as they are. Thank you.
Any questions for the deputant? No? Okay, thank you. Terry Mills?
Good afternoon. I'm Terry Mills. I was retained by the Panoses as a planner on this item, and I will try to be brief, although, as you've heard, there's sort of a lot behind all this. But I just I'll try to give you information that adds to what's been said. This shows us the location of 44, and then my client is the blue one here at 43. And what I've marked as well is the yellow area at the top shows that along Dawlish, they're all 15-meter lots. So they're good wide lots. So then in the south, where this is, they're 20-meter lots. In fact, the subject property 44 is almost 22 meters wide. And so you get that Lawrence Park solution when you're looking at things where people sort of do a lot of their privacy with landscaping rather than building walls. The other things I wanted to note is where the green dots are. It's showing that Glen Allen and Strathdean here are very quiet streets, whereas Millhaven and Dawlish are through streets, so they have a bit more traffic on them, but there's no sidewalks anywhere. So generally the green dotted streets are where you see a lot of people walking and the like. And so that's where we're located here. So as much as there's less traffic, if you're getting out of your driveway, you do have to be careful, as you saw in the photograph, that quite often there's a lot of people on the street. These photographs, pardon the reflection there, all I wanted to provide here was some examples of streetscape, so we see that, yes, there's a lot of green landscaping and shrubberies, etc. There are two examples here, the middle left, and that's a fence that you can see a step back because it was near the corner of street, keeping a view line good there. The bottom left one is actually sort of the bad boy. That's fence is built right on the city property for the first pillar and a half in, so that's not a good example. But when you look in all the other pictures, all these houses, there are no fences in the front yards between houses. And that's very much the character of Lawrence Park. And again, you'll find even in backyards, people will have very low fences in many cases, not necessarily here. And then they'll use landscaping so that they have privacy, but they get, a sense of view of the open space in the rears. My point on this one is just to say, here's the house, and south is Glen Allen. That's where they show on the drawing. That's the entry side of the house. So that's, in a sense, truly their front yard. Although on the right-hand side, that's the side street, which is known as the front for the fencing purposes. So at the back, this fence is referred to as a rear yard fence between the properties along here. Okay, and if this were the front yard here, they would actually be subject to a 1.2 meter requirement maximum for a fence. But because it's addressed here, although every way it truly is oriented in this side, you know, any height gets to be a problem in terms of when you look at the whole streetscape. This is just showing the house on the backyard under construction. You've sort of seen this already. You can see the height of the retaining wall on the upper left, and then the step down with the pool, and the pool undercuts again the angle of repose of the foundation wall. So there's some problems. This is showing before the fence got built, and I think we've looked at this already, but here it's showing the difference in height. And as you come back here, it gets to be higher. So it's 5'4" height difference in height between grades. So you work with average grade for this stuff. The blue lines here are showing what the problematic area is here. We're, you know, it's supposed to be transparent by the street. I won't go into too much detail on that. Now the fencing is actually, over the weekend, got built, all except for the last bit to the right. And these are the actual height shown. And now they talk about this thing stepping up at 1.5 meters above the height of my client's driveway. In actuality, on the far right, they're actually at 1.52, and they still have one board to go on the top, so they're going to be at 1.56. So they're sort of crayoning a bit outside the lines, and they're a bit in a rush. But ultimately, I come down in my conclusion in the letter that I put into you about, you know, that it should be transparent at the street, should be low, and then my very last paragraph is, quite frankly, I do think that it would be best if my client and the development next door were to sit down, work out a solution for this, and bring it back to council. But I cannot recommend that they should have a solid fence in that 2.4 meter distance back from the road. That's
what
what
I'm looking at here. Yeah, for staff? Any questions for the deputant? I can ask one here. I have a question for you. So this is your letter with these pictures here.
Yes.
And I see some guy in a tracksuit putting up a board. It looks like the front of the house. It looks like the house in question is under construction, so I don't know what I'm looking at here. This looks like construction hoarding or something. I don't know whether there's a tree protection zone around the tree in the background there.
Is this related to this
I
diagram?
don't see, just let me finish here. I mean, I know this is in relation to a swimming pool. I don't see any pictures. Until you put something quickly up there, there's been nothing in front of me that indicates anything that there's a swimming pool here, although the staff report refers to a swimming pool.
Well, the swimming pool, that's in the picture, it's up there now. That's that vertical wall, that's the wall of the pool.
4 feet from the driveway.
Yeah, but in your submission, I don't see any swimming pool here. All I see
well,
is the construction zone next door.
It's shown on the site plan. That would be my page 4 of the
Maybe these are
attachment.
questions for staff. I don't know, this looks like a big mishmash here. Okay, I'm done. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, so these, is this questions of staff?
Questions of staff.
Yes, okay, perfect. So
Oh, I'm
these.
sorry.
No,
There was
go ahead.
one more deputant.
Oh, there is?
Everyone's got an opinion today. Chris and Maria Panglitopoulos.
Okay.
And I do apologize if I mispronounced that.
So do we speak separately, or do we speak, can we speak?
Together would be
Ms.
great.
Preference, okay.
Yeah,
So,
running out of time.
my name is Maria. Good afternoon. I guess it's afternoon now, city staff. My name is Maria. This is Chris, husband and wife, and we're the owners of 44 Glen Allen. We wanted to express our concerns and tell you a little bit about the history of the lot. We are the third owners under the development that purchased it to live here. Because the other sellers that had approved lots found it difficult to work with 42 Glen Allen, and we were actually warned when buying the property that there was a history of a difficult individual that lives next door. Having said that, the typography of our lot is very interesting. It has very low, high points. So when we did design the house, it's designed to be a residence that my in-laws, Chris's parents, can move into, who are in walkers. And so we needed a flat residence, which addresses the reason why the design is the way it is, because they will be at times living with us. We live in a neighborhood that doesn't have sidewalks. We live in a neighborhood that has, that doesn't have the sidewalks. We also bought a lot that had a lot of obstructions, which are coming to the concerns of our neighbors. We, at the end of the day, just want a secure lot. Tracy, our neighbor, just spoke about the individuals that were affected yesterday with the concerns of security. They were actually my friends that were affected on the street. And we know that they were trying to jump people's backyards. By having a clear fence looking into our yard, we have 2 young children. We have been, affected by robbery in the past. We have neighbors that continuously look over our yard, which we're fine with, and we understand the lot and the topography. But to have somebody staring at us and to have, people who walk by and have no security at all is something that we think is unreasonable. And we've been dealing with unreasonable issues all along the way. Yes, there's tree protection around that tree. We've respected it along the way. It did grow an inch over the 2 years of our build, and it's now, we've addressed it. Every time somebody comes from the city, we're very helpful, and we work with them. And we want to show you a couple more photos that potentially can help describe the sight lines.
This picture shows, I guess, the eastward view from 42 down the street to the corner. You can see the stop sign in the backyard. On the left-hand side, where the wrought iron fence is there, that would be where the fence would end there. As you can see, there's plenty of viewing capability to see almost to the end. Once the hoarding does come down, people can be able to, see them walk, run, jog, etc. This view is from the other angle, looking upwards of the driveway, and the sight lines that you can see from, I guess, 242 Glen Allen. Again, this is eastward, down the whole side of the, I guess, my side of the property as well, where you can see the adjacent homes across the street on the Daneswood side. And then this was just with respects to the height of the fence. As you can see, a hockey fence is just as high as the board fence behind that. There was always a concern about scalability and someone even using the wrought iron fence to jump over into our property, where they can even use just say a hockey net that's left on the driveway to be able to climb over. There's plenty of other pictures I can show. Like I said, visibility is okay on this one as well. Sorry, I had on my phone. Neighbor's car, as you can see, sort of a tight there, where it's a car and a half length coming down from the property line to the edge of the street, where there's, in my opinion, plenty of space to look left and right of individuals walking and so forth. Thank you for your time. If any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for the deputants?
Former speaker. Why is the grading so low? Like it's.
We have a grading issue. The front yard, when we designed the house, is Daneswood.
Yeah.
And so when you continue going down the street, our front yard is Daneswood, not Glen Allen. Even though our front door's on Glen Allen, our front yard's on Daneswood. And so you have height maps that you have to adhere to while you're going through the zoning process. We've complied with all of that. We never went for a height map amendment. And again, we needed a residence that had flat topography, because we do have Chris's parents who are in walkers.
Okay, and I see the lot. Again, the staff have submitted this to us. There's a photo above photograph 3. For some reason, it's not labeled, but there only seems to be that one tree left. Were there other trees cleared, city trees, or your own?
They're all our own trees, no other city trees.
Your trees were cleared?
Right.
Okay.
And that was part of the approval.
At the time.
Yeah.
And because of the approval, we're all planning to put more trees as per our.
You have a replanting
Yes.
plan? Okay.
Yes.
All right,
Yes.
thank you for that information.
Anybody else?
Any other questions for the deputants? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Am I allowed to rebut?
No, no, it's not a debating society, but thank you for the offer. You can meet with your local counselor at a future date. Questions for staff?
So obviously, this is incredibly awkward as the local counselor because it pits neighbor against neighbor, which we never like in a community, particularly as tightly knit as this one, where there has been, it is true, there's been a number of safety issues, crime and safety issues recently, just in the last 48 hours particularly. But I guess my question really comes down to something Councillor Carroll was talking about earlier, and Councillor Cole, and that's safety being the number one issue here. So, you know, I would have loved to have seen staff actually make a recommendation on this, but that's not there. But so I'm going to ask you to respond to a simple question, and that is, you've visited the site, correct? You've been on site,
Yes, that's correct.
and you've looked at the various vantage points and sight lines,
Yes, I have.
etc.
Yes, I have.
Yes,
Yep.
okay. So I guess my question would be one of safety, as I've mentioned, and does this potentially obstruct the view of the residents, I guess they're south, are they south of the adjacent residents? I guess they're the residents at 42 Glen
They
Allen.
are west of 44.
So it's
yeah.
west, thank you for that directional help. So the residents at 42 Glen Allen, does this obstruct their view for egress and entry and in and out of their driveway? I think that's my safety question to you.
Yes, I think if we look at the spirit of the bylaw there, that section's obviously come about to maintain that site triangle as you're backing off or driving off a driveway. So in essence, if you're removing that provision and you're making that solid board, then it's only going to make that less safe by doing so, because you are restricting the visibility from the driveway of 42, albeit that it's set back some 5 meters from the road in any case to the property line. But I think anything further is removing an element of safety there.
So when you reference the spirit of the bylaw, could you just expand that spirit or the?
Yeah, so the bylaw gives us the provision to require that 2.4 meters from the property line back should be of open construction, and the reason for that is to maintain that visibility from a driveway, to give the driver of a vehicle, whether backing out or driving off a driveway, visibility of pedestrian or vehicles on the roadway. So the purpose of this fence exemption is asking to be exempt from that. So we're essentially removing that safety element from it.
And that safety provision was put there to ensure I'm guessing you've just alluded to it, pedestrians, not just motorists in and out.
Anybody using the roadway.
But also pedestrians and, okay.
Correct.
So you're saying, I think if I could capture what you're saying, and you can just verify that you feel that there is an potential obstruction to the view, sight lines for the cars in and out of that driveway and pedestrians?
Yeah, if the fence was solid and it's right the way up to the property line, then yes, it is going to obstruct the driveway. It's a matter of how much it's obstructing it and how much of a safety concern it is. But yes, it is obstructing it from what it should be by the letter of the bylaw.
And you're indicating that's a safety issue?
Yes, I would say so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Any other questions for staff? I have a couple. 44 Glen Allen is under construction, is that correct?
That's correct.
And they're in the process of building this fence, or it's partially erected?
I haven't visited the site recently. The deputants said in their closing that the fence was nearly completed.
Now, the fence in question in your report will form part of a swimming pool enclosure. I don't see any indication a swimming pool is either under construction, working, planned in any of the report before us, nor in the aerial photographs. I'm just wondering how this relates. And many of the photographs we've been provided actually look like front yard photographs. how does this relate to a swimming pool? I'm just having a tough time getting
So
around
the swimming pool is in the rear yard of number 44, so it's on the west side of the home as it abuts the property line with number 42.
So it's an operational swimming pool?
It's going to be. When I visited it, when there was snow on the ground, it was under construction. I don't know what the status is now.
I'm looking at this construction site, I'm wondering if anything conforms to that. I see halfway, I guess it's hoarding, no fencing around subject property. I don't know, it looks like maybe some tree protection zones.
Yeah, there's some temporary construction fencing around that site at the moment.
All right, I think my mind's made up. Any other questions for staff? Speakers?
Speak briefly. I think my councillor colleagues realize this is incredibly difficult for me because, as I said earlier, it's just putting neighbor against neighbor, and that's really not the way I like to work. Having said this, a decision has to be made. We have this before us, and we have to decide which way to go, and I don't want to defer it because you see that there's already activity happening on the site. But I mean, Councillor Carroll alluded to this maybe offline more than online, but I just feel like we're being a bit let down on these issues, or neighbors are being let down, residents, by simply our frontline staff who aren't really clarifying for residents the implications of building pools and fences and trees, etc. There's not a big picture approach, which has been really my frustration. There's that silo effect still reigns supreme at City Hall, and the neighbors who are building, this family that's building at 44 Glen Allen, are probably victims of this in some sense, because they're probably getting information piecemeal from different divisions and departments, and that front line counter staff are just saying, sure, you can do this, sure, you can do that. So I think this is it's an important point, and it's really unfortunate, but I think just based on what I've heard from staff today through this process that we've been, and we've heard from a number of speakers, that we have to support what staff are saying, and that is simply that it could be, it's not within the spirit of the bylaw, one, and two, it could be a safety issue. And I think at the end of the day, as a city council, we have to think of safety first. So I'm not happy about this decision or outcome because one neighbor is let down, and but I am going to move staff's first recommendation, and staff's first recommendation is to refuse it.
Any other speakers? Councillor Carroll?
I don't want to leave Councillor Robinson being the only bad guy, because I did make those comments offline, but they really are heartfelt. I've reached the point, maybe it's the expansion of the wards, and I'm now seeing it more often, but I got to the point where I just can't help thinking that if, when someone comes in with their plans for their building, and there is some look at the site, but time and again, we have people come to us in this chamber, which means by then a considerable amount of staff time and money has been spent reviewing and to actually launch a report writing, write it, then put it on an agenda, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because someone came in building a $2 million home, a $3 or a $4 million home, and no one said, by any chance, millionaire, will you be putting a pool in the backyard? Let's talk about that. So, like, I don't think, I just can't believe that they wouldn't be able to do more work with their architects and their contractors if they didn't get the whole picture at the counter. Council will take a dim view of this. You really are well advised not to go there, because council will turn you down. So go back to your architect and come up with something that isn't going to require a huge amount of variance and isn't going to end up in this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Any other speakers? I'm going to support Councillor Robinson, the local councillor. I think it is incumbent on this council to put this to a stop now, before the homeowner invests any more money in an illegal fence that will eventually face an order for tear down. I would strongly urge them to look at their construction site and see whether that complies with some of the rules we have about building permits. And if they want to come back here at a later date with a fence that conforms, then I think we'll be more amiable. So Councillor Robinson has moved recommendation number 1, which is a refusal of the application for exemption. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Yeah. Councillor Cole, you have a motion to introduce and enact certain bills.
I move that the North York Community Council pass and declare as bylaws bills 812 to 817 prepared for the May 22nd, 2019 meetings 6 of the Community Council, and I so move.
Shall these bills be passed and declared as a bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Councillor Carroll, you have a motion to introduce and enact the confirming bill.
Yes, that the North York Community Council pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the North York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting number 6 on May 22nd, 2019.
Shall this bill be passed and declared as a bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. That concludes our business for today. We are adjourned. I'd like to thank councillors, clerk staff, and members of the public.
Okay.